everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Rumcast. This is the podcast that talks all things rum related with the people who love and shape it. My name's Will Hookinga, here as always with my host, John Gulla. John, we've got a fun little exercise today that we're going to do. A little bit of a bracket challenge to try to determine what are the best 80 proof rums out there right now. And listeners may be scratching their heads a little bit, being like, hey, aren't you the guys that constantly complain about 80 proof rums and wish that there were higher strength rums? And while that is true, I think it's really interesting and can be beneficial to look, 80 proof rums are out there and they're going to be for a long time. So we may as well figure out which ones are the best, which ones are worth seeking out, which ones are priced correctly, which ones are overpriced, and all that sort of thing. So we've got some setup of like how we decided which rums to do and that sort of thing that we'll get into in a second. But you know, it's the intro of the episode. It's a couple of days. We're recording this on Tuesday before Thanksgiving. That's coming up. This episode will come out a couple of days after Thanksgiving. So everyone's got the holidays on the brain. I know you're wrapping up work. I think you have a little bit more to do tomorrow. So your brain is almost in mini vacation mode. But you know, what do you look forward to about Thanksgiving? What do you have any out there kind of popular side dish takes, or do you eat anything unusual at Thanksgiving? What are kind of your go-to things at the Thanksgiving table? What are you reaching for first?
Ooh, man. Well, before I answer that, yes, my brain is already on mini vacation, even though I do have to work tomorrow. But you know, I think fairly traditional in terms of Thanksgiving. Like you just mentioned, and I hope I'm not blowing up your spot here before you get to it, but you just mentioned you're doing a pork loin, and I'm like,
yeah, I did.
You're not doing a turkey?
No.
So like for me, turkey is the traditional, and although I would welcome a pork loin, I still feel like I would want turkey. I love smoked turkey, and I've had that a few times. We've had the fried turkeys, and those are excellent, although dangerous.
Fried turkey is really good.
Yeah. But I would say the most maybe weird one, I don't know if this is weird, but it's different, is there's a sweet potato casserole that my mom and now my wife also makes. That is, there's one, you know, like, have you ever seen the one with the marshmallows on top?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so there's that one.
Kind of torched marshmallows.
Right. That one's good. It's fine, you know.
Okay.
It's okay. But there's one with, like, nuts on top, and it's a little bit sweeter. And it's got this like caramelized, nut crusted kind of.
The nut version is sweeter than the marshmallow version?
I think it is, actually.
Interesting.
I think, I'm not sure if it's, just the recipe calls for more sugar to be added to the sweet potatoes or something. But
or maybe it's the nut mix on top also has like sugar and goodness like that sprinkled in. Probably,
That could be it. It's very desserty almost, even though I don't eat it as a dessert. Mm-hmm. But it's great. I prefer, I want all the carbs, Will. I want the mashed potatoes. I want the sweet potatoes. I want all of those sides, the stuffing, the dressing. That's a debate right there, by the way. Is it
you
stuffing
call it dressing or
stuffing?
Stuffing? Well, I grew up in a stuffing household. Oh, no. Sorry. I grew up in a dressing household, which I feel like dressing is, I feel like you hear that more in the South. So, but I married into a family that calls it stuffing. So I go back and forth. I think this year my mother-in-law is making her stuffing, so it'll be stuffing this year. And that actually is one of my favorite things. So stuffing,
my wife's also,
I like ones that have like a lot of herbs in there. There's got to be like some rosemary and all those, classic herbs and, dump some gravy on top. So good. I love stuffing, love dressing, whatever you call it. It's good.
I like stuffing also, although I'm particular with it. I want it to have good texture. It can't be mushy. Mushy stuffing or dressing or whatever you want to call it. I think I call it stuffing too, by the way. It doesn't do anything for me at that point. So it's got to have good texture. It's got to have something going on. Also, nuts. I like nuts in my stuffing.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever had nuts in stuffing before.
Yeah, it works. It works. You can do like walnuts or something like that.
I could see it. People put all sorts of interesting stuff. I think some people put, what's the seafood that's in stuffing sometimes?
Seafood?
They'll do like it's not, I was going to say octopus, but it's not that. It's like,
squid?
Calamari, maybe?
Cuttlefish?
Hold on.
No, I've never heard of this.
Oh, this isn't coming up at all, so maybe I made this up in my head. I do know some people put sausage in stuffing and things like that. So there's all kinds of variations, but I'm I'm a big stuffing dressing guy, and I love mashed potatoes and gravy is kind of a go-to classic for me that I always love. So, I love eating things other than turkey on Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So, the last 2 years, I've had enough roast turkeys in my life. It's time to, eat things that people tend to enjoy more than once a year because they're actually good. So that's what I go for instead of turkey.
Wait, so you just don't like turkey at all now? You're done.
I don't dislike it at all. It's just a low ceiling food. The best version of turkey is almost impossible to achieve. And if you do, it's still like you're just hoping and praying it hasn't dried out in the middle and that the outside has stayed crispy. It's such a fine line of being able to nail it. And even if you do, the best possible version of a roast chicken tastes better than a roast turkey. It just does, John. You can't argue with me. It just does. That's why the roast chicken is served year round and the roast turkey is only brought out for the holidays out of tradition.
But I can argue with you. We're not going to spend too much time arguing on this, but I will say roast chicken, most times you're right. It's much easier to nail, but there's something about a turkey that when you get it right, especially like fried or smoked, you don't get that in chicken, right? I've had smoked chicken. That's
you
good,
get something better. You get something better.
Well, we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this one here. But I was gonna ask you, as we're moving into talking about rum, do you have a Thanksgiving rum? Is there something you bring out for Thanksgiving?
No, I don't have a. It'll just be whatever strikes me. It'll probably be something I don't reach for as often, maybe something that I want to take my time with, kind of a more special occasion type rum.
I'm with you. Yeah.
So, I'm not one to be extremely precious over like wanting to hang on to bottles forever, but I do have some that I'm just like, I want to enjoy this slowly over the period of a couple of years as opposed to, 6 months or something like that. So I'll probably pull out one of those bottles that I go through a little slower so I can appreciate it a little bit longer. And speaking of appreciating rum, we don't often do this. Every now and then we have a sponsor on the show. We do have a sponsor for this episode. And I just want to do a quick teaser. I think listeners will be interested to hear this one because for the first time ever, it's a discount on the Rumcast for something that was a pretty popular product. It's not a rum, but it is something that many people, the types of people who listen to our podcast, were very interested in buying over the last year or so. So I'm excited for people to hear that. But before we transition to the topic of the show, I do want to do a little setup of just why we're doing this in the first place.
Sure.
And the reason goes back to when we were doing our mailbag episode, we got a question that sparked so much thought between us that we were like, we should just do a whole episode about this. And it was a question from Sam, which was, what are the best 40% sippers if money was no object? And what's the best value at 40%? And so we kind of leaned into the latter portion of that question of what's the best value at 40%. And like I was saying earlier, we so often are begging producers to release stuff even just a little bit over 40%. But like I also said, 40% for many reasons is kind of here to stay. And I was kind of thinking, I'd heard little bits and pieces over the years of like why that's kind of the default standard for most spirits, because it's not just rum, it's every major spirit category has lots of releases at 80 proof. And I found a pretty good article on VinePair that came out a few years ago, I believe in 2020, by a writer named Tim McCurdy about this subject of like, why is everything 80 proof? I'll link to it in the show notes, but I kind of wanted to summarize my main takeaways from it, which are the two biggest factors I think are extremely simple and easy to understand. So I'll start with those, which is 80 proof is the minimum alcohol level allowed by law in the US for most, if not all, spirit categories. So if you want to label something rum or whiskey or whatever, there are more rules than just this, but it has to be a minimum of 80 proof. Otherwise, it's going to be, like a distilled specialty spirit or a rum liqueur or something like that. And it won't, legally be whatever the spirit you're going for. And then the second motivating factor is that the higher the proof, the higher the tax for producers. So the primary reasons I think are sort of economic and financial and dictated by the essentially the law of the U.S. And I'm sure other countries have minimum proof requirements as well.
But they're even lower, some of that.
Yeah. Some of the
Republic goes to like 37%. I've seen those. Yeah.
And there's several Latin American countries I'm aware of that, can do 37 and a half, I think. Right. So you see that a lot. Sometimes they have two versions. They have like a 37.5% for local markets and 40% version for export markets. But another interesting thing that the article pointed out was that around like there was a lot of historical precedent, obviously, for stuff being bottled above 80 proof, particularly in aged spirits like whiskey. It was very common to see stuff that was bottled well above that. And then around the 1950s, there was kind of a shift in consumer tastes, thanks to there were like lighter profile Canadian whiskeys that had come over, especially during Prohibition. There was lower proof blended Scotch that had started becoming popular. So like there was already sort of a shifting taste towards these lighter bodied, easier drinking, more approachable spirits. Yeah. And then in the 80s, there was a big boom in kind of 80 proof clear spirits like vodka. Light beer came out and was really big. Yeah. Whiskey sales were at record lows. And so a lot of producers then, even of aged spirits, started dialing back the strength on some of their higher proof products. But now, I think in recent years, there's been more of a shift towards proofs ticking back up, particularly in categories like whiskey. And we're even seeing it a little bit in rum. We're starting to see more of the producers we talk about regularly on the show putting out higher strength versions. I know a lot of the products from Foursquare, like the Doorleys line, has started ticking up a lot of their strengths, and we've seen it in other producers as well. So it's really kind of that combination of economics and consumer preference, I believe, is kind of like the biggest drivers of it. And so, one of the things is if you want more than 80 proof, you need to tell producers, because in many ways, they're incentivized to give it to you at the minimum, basically, at least financially. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting. And I'm giving a very high level summary of that. But if you want like more details, I'll link to that article. And I'm sure there are many more articles and research that's been done out there. So. Yeah.
And another point to add there is I think the conception among most people is that proof equals flavor. Right. So the higher the proof, the more flavor is in the liquid. And I think that generally holds true, I would say. But, there's a diminishing return also with it, I think. Yep. But, it's not a one-to-one with this rum versus that rum, which is why we're setting this whole exercise up in the first place, right? To see what are the differences in all of these different rums as sipping experiences, even though they are all at a 80 proof.
Yeah, definitely. There's a wide range. Like some rums can drink really well at lower proofs. Some rums do a lot better at higher proofs. Some rums tend to just, you can't really, they get too intense at high. Like there's a sweet spot for most spirits. And I think we have a tendency to think 80 proof is well below the sweet spot for most. And I would say that's by and large true to me, especially if we're talking about rum specifically. I think most 80 proof rums could benefit from bumping that up some, but I do think it's possible there's some out there that do it well. And so we want to figure out what are the best ones. So I think we can take a little break and then we'll come back and we will talk about how we decided on these rums, how we're going to compare them, and get into all the details. Hey Rumcasters, if you've listened to the show for a while now, there's one rum website that you've probably heard John and I reference more than any other, and that's rumwonk.com. Matt Petrick's website full of deep dives into the many corners of the rum world. Well, recently, Matt and co-author Carrie Smith went beyond the website and published their most definitive deep dive to date, Modern Caribbean Rum, a hardcover 850-page book that takes you inside 75 distilleries in 20 Caribbean rum-making regions and much more. And now through December 10th, you can get 10% off Modern Caribbean Rum by going to wonkpress.com, that's WONK press.com, and using promo code RUMCAST. Plus, Matt and Carrie will sign your copy at no additional cost. This is the first time they've offered a discount on the book, and it'll only be around until December 10th. So go to wonkpress.com and use promo code RUMCAST when you purchase a copy of Modern Caribbean Rum. If you're craving a deeper understanding of the world of Caribbean rum, you'd have a tough time finding a better place to start than this book. It looks at the region's rum from so many different angles, including its history, classifications, the business of rum, every step of production, from the cane fields to the aging warehouses, and much more. Plus, the book is full of 900 photographs and images that really bring the subject to life. So again, you can get 10% off your copy by using promo code RUMCAST at wonkpress.com through December 10th, and it will be signed at no additional cost. So go to wonkpress.com now to grab the deal. Now back to the show.
Okay, we're back with our 40% or 80 proof rum off, you might say, here in a first for us, Will, where we're going to do this in part because there are just so many 80 proof rums out there on the market. We struggled with how would we even tackle this question to begin with.
Yeah.
And there's no perfect way to do this, but we've found that, well, how can we just add value to the conversation and bring a little bit of perspective in? Of course, this is going to be our own opinions, right? Nothing more than just how we experience these and what we think about them. But we think there's some value in that. And, you know, for those of you at home that are going to have these rums, play along with us, see what you think with it. But the idea is we're going to do a bracket. So, Will, I know
this was an ingenious little wrinkle that you came up with because we kind of texted back and forth. We weren't sure how we were going to approach it. And I think you almost jokingly introduced the idea of a bracket. And I was like, wait a second, there's something to this. So I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we should be doing this in March, really, but here we are in November, and we're going to start a bracket here. And if it's a fun thing that works out well, we can do more of them in the future, and maybe even more 40 proof, because Lord knows there's more out there than just 10 that we're doing today. But Will, so we're starting with 10. I said 40 proof. I meant 40%. Sorry.
We'll probably mix that up a bunch throughout this episode.
So 40% or 80 proof. And there's a lot of these. We're going to pick 10 that we kind of had these available and we're able to get the same lineup, which is why these 10 are the choices. And partly there's other reasons. You know, one is we either may find something interesting about them or just, wanted to put them head to head and see how they did. So I think, Will, why don't you tell them kind of how we set this up and how we're going to move forward? Yeah,
so like you said, we started with, there's a million choices we could have had. We started with 10, and we basically both went through our cabinets and asked ourselves, what are the 80 proof rums that we already have that are also just common 80 proof rums that people buy? And the question was specifically talking about sipping as well. So we wanted to shy away from rums that are seen purely as, or for the most part, mixers. And we wanted to do stuff that's widely available, that's common. A lot of these are things that are maybe referred to as gateway rums sometimes. So we wanted to start with ones that people would be familiar with and that are widely available and kind of representative of what the 80 proof rum market looks like. Now, that being said, there are a bunch of rums that John and I listed that we are not including in this because, A, we want this to, to be practical. Let's start with what we have. Right. A couple of these bottles we did run out and get, but also, we don't want to do a bracket with 40 rums that's going to be, 6 hours long to listen to, and we're both passed out by the end of it. So what I will say is, I think if this goes well, this is the kind of thing that we can continue. So, for example, if we finish out this bracket and we have a winner at the end of it, or one that we think is the best of the group, we can pit that one against future brackets because there are many other rums that we could bring into this. And what we did do was we narrowed it down to a specific type of rum, or not super specific, but at least a broad category of rum. There's something that these all have in common. A, they are aged. And B, they are molasses-based. So I think what I could see a future of, if people enjoy this episode and tell us if you do, is we'd be happy to do more of these and just, keep churning out, figuring out which 80 proof rum, can last among all these bracket challenges.
Into the meta bracket, you might
exactly,
say.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we could apply this to other categories beyond 80 proof as well, of course. But all that to say is just, before you write to us and say, I can't believe you left this out. We know, we're aware that there are some iconic 80 proof rums that are not in this. This is just chapter 1, I guess you could say. Unless you hate the episode, think it's stupid and we shouldn't do anymore. In which case, if that's the overwhelming reaction, this may be the last one. But we're going to have fun with this. And the first thing you have to do when creating a bracket is come up with the seeding. So, if you're not into bracketology and sports tournaments and things like that, seeding is essentially how you determine the matchups. So traditionally in the world of sports, the teams that are the best, either ranked the highest or have the best record, they get the high seeds, the number 1 seed being the best team. And then the lowest seed goes to the smaller teams that maybe didn't finish the year as strong, that sort of thing. And so you start out matching up the highest seed against the lowest seed, and then you have, the 2 goes against, in this case, since it's 10 seeds, the 1 matches up against the 10, 2 matches up against 9, and so on until you get to the middle. So what we had to do was we didn't want to pre-rank these in terms of perceived quality, because we want to go in with a fresh perspective. Obviously, John and I at various points, I think, have had all of these rums. Some of them, I had them so long ago, I honestly don't remember that much about them. But so what we tried to do was award the highest seeds to the rums that have what I would say is either they're extremely popular or generally respected among the rum community, I would say. And I think we factored price a little bit. Price is a little bit of a factor in terms of the seeding, but generally it was a little bit about just broad how we think these rums are perceived within the rum community. Because we know there are some rums in here that people, purists will maybe turn their noses up at a little bit. And there are ones that come from distilleries that, are kind of iconic rum producers and maybe have a little bit, more of a sterling reputation. So that's kind of anything to add there, John?
No, just other than we're going to go through these and we're going to give information as we do the brackets. Yeah. That's, so it's more than just us tasting these things and giving immediate feedback and going. It's also kind of a holistic view of them. Some of these, as you mentioned, Will, they may have sugar added. There's no other way to say it, right? Yeah. We're aware of that. Many 40% ABV rums do. So it's kind of hard to avoid if we're going to hold up the ideal of what you said about availability, about, some of just the general market of rum without including them. So we're aware. We obviously tend to skew towards dry rums or no sugar added rums. And, maybe that comes out in our preferences as we do this. Yeah. And I think that's okay. But I also don't think it would be okay to just simply ignore all of them. Now, that said, Will, we did try to pick ones that I think we knew, okay, if they have sugar added, it's not a ton, right? In most cases, at least, right? We can say that. So we're staying away from the ones, Boom Boo is not in here, right? Right. And some of the other ones that might have a really reputation for having, way too much sugar added. So that's going to be an interesting thing, I think, to see how those stack up against the no sugar added. I actually will, just as a preface to this, I went to a recent event in Miami here, the Rum Renaissance Festival. I think you know it because we met there. And one thing I noticed was I went ahead and tried some of the rums that were there that had sugar added, and I knew they had sugar added. And, I still enjoy them. The ones that are not sickly sweet. Yeah. So there's something about them to enjoy, even if you may have a preference for no sugar added. So it's partly, to me, about also finding, well, how much do they stack up against some of these other ones, and what does that look like at the end? We're
going to quickly run down the list of rums that we're doing. So I'll do them in order of seeds. So our number 1 seed, El Dorado 15. Our number 2 seed, Admiral Rodney HMS Royal Oak. Our number 3 seed is Don Q Gran Reserva. Number 4 seed is El Dorado 12. Number 5 seed, Santa Teresa 1796. Number 6 seed, Ron Abuelo XV or 15, the Napoleon, which is the cognac cask finish. 7 seed, Havana Club 7. 8 seed, Money Musk Classic Gold. 9 seed, Brugal 1888, and 10 seed 10-1 dark. So kind of a wide range, I would say, of widely available popular rums, some that have been around for a while, some that are newer to the scene, like 10-1 dark. And again, this is not meant to be like, these are the most iconic 80 proof rums. Again, it's a blend of ones that I do think there are some iconic ones in there, but also some of it is just a blend of what we have and stuff that is kind of making the rounds in the rum world is widely available. So I don't think there's any rums in there that people are just like, well, I've never heard of that. If you're if you're a rum geek, which if you're listening, you probably are. So we are going to do this. The first 2 head-to-head matchups that we're going to do. We're going to start with the 8 seed, 7 seed. Sorry, these numbers are tiny on my screen. The 8 seed versus the 9 seed, which is Money Musk Gold versus Brugal 1888. And then we're going to do Havana Club 7 versus 10-1 Dark, which is the 7 seed versus the 10 seed. So, John, are you ready to... I've got these first two in front of me, the Brugal 1888 and the Money Musk Classic Gold. Do we want to start nosing these and filling listeners in on a little bit of the background on each of the rums?
Yeah, I've got them lined up here and I'm ready to go. And the first thing I will say is looking at these two side by side is the color is very different. The Money Musk that I have is far lighter in color than the Brugal. The Brugal 1888, is very dark.
It is quite dark.
For what it is, yeah, it almost makes me feel like I wonder if there's any added coloring in there because it is quite dark. And I know it's not super old, but, there's a lot of things that go into that in terms of how the coloring comes out of a barrel. So
yeah. So I'll quickly break down sort of what we're dealing with here as we kind of nose them. So Brugal 1888, this is a Dominican Republic rum, column still, aged in ex-bourbon and sherry casks. It's no age statement. Details online are a little bit all over the place. As is typical with a lot of these releases, you go try to find the straightforward information. It's not always easily accessible. So you start going to the reviews and you see in one place it says 5 to 14 years. Others say 6 to 8 years. I looked up the Brugal 1888 label since I did not have the bottle in front of me. You sent me a sample, and the written in Spanish on the label, it says an aging of up to 8 years in ex-bourbon American oak barrels, followed by a second aging of up to 6 years in single-use Spanish oak, previously used to age sherry. So it is a blend of rums up to 8 or up to 6 years. There is, according to online sources, a small amount of sugar added. I've seen 4 grams per liter, according to Alco, which is one of the databases linked on Rum Revelations. And the other thing we're going to consider as we compare these is the average price as well. So when I say average, it's not a literal average. I just perused online, saw some different numbers and said, it's about here. So the average price of Brugal 1888, I think, tends to be somewhere around $43.99. Then on the other hand, Money Musk Classic Gold, this is a Jamaican rum. It's a blend of column and pot still rums that come from Clarendon and Long Pond, according to the label. And it's aged for a minimum of 5 years in ex-bourbon barrels, according to the label as well. Typically priced somewhere around $35.99 and no sugar added. So, John, as I've been talking, I think you've probably been giving these little no's. Anything that stands out to you right away between the two?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is I like both of these. I really like the nose on both of these. The Money Musk gives me that, I guess that's why they call it the classic. It gives you a classic Jamaican rum nose.
It does.
It's not bowling me over, but it's a 40% ABV, so I don't expect it to. And it's very pleasant. I feel like I can smell a little bit of the pot still in it.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's not hidden, but it's not overpowering. It smells like a quality rum.
It does. It hits you right away that it's Jamaica. It just, all the, so many signature notes are there. And it's to me, I haven't had this rum in a while. A pleasant surprise at the complexity of the nose. It's not overly complex, but it's a really pleasant nose. You get, I'm getting classic kind of banana, pineapple, just the fruity, little touch. At this point in my rum journey, I wouldn't even refer to it as funk. I think to the uninitiated, there's a hint of funk, more so than I think you would get in an Appleton 8 or something like that.
There's almost that musk. I don't know how better to describe it.
Yeah.
But there's a musk there also that I get from very high quality rums that is in this rum that is, like you mentioned, the average price is $35. You just don't find that very often.
Yeah, well, and especially in one that also calls itself classic gold. I feel like when you get the gold or dark or, whatever descriptors in an aged rum, that generally is going to connote budget rum. So, yeah, really pleasantly surprised. And on the other end, the Brugal 1888, obviously comparing Dominican Republic rum, all column still, to Jamaican column blend. I swear I haven't had a drop to drink today. Obviously, there's going to be a big difference. And I think rum geeks have a little bit of a bias toward the Jamaican side of things, a little bit bolder flavors. But the Brugal 1888 is a really nice nose for that style of rum. It's very clean, but you get that kind of tobacco, heavy oak, spice, just a completely different approach to rum making that is apparent right away. So, but really pleasant. It's like I feel like I'm sitting in like a
well decorated office.
No, like a classy cigar lounge almost sort of is the vibe.
We're close.
There's some leather furniture.
Exactly. I was going to say with the pleats.
Someone isn't currently smoking, but you can tell that people have recently smoked in there. You got that.
There's books of all kinds in this room.
Leather bound books, everything like that. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to taste. I'm going to start with the Brugal 1888.
While you're tasting that, do you nose a lot of the sherry? Because I know you're fairly sensitive to sherry finishes. I'm not even sure you can call this a finish. It's aged up to 6 years. That's a secondary maturation, right?
I do. I wasn't picking up on it as much at first, but even though I just read the sherry thing, I kind of I wasn't looking for it. And as I go back, I do notice it more there now. It's that kind of nuttiness to it that it adds. And I will say this is the amount of sherry influence that I prefer. It's not super heavy-handed sherry influence to me. It's a nice balance between the two, I think.
I agree. I think they struck a good balance with this product, and I think it's sweet, but not overly sweet. I could probably tell and pick out of a lineup that I feel like this has a little bit of sugar in it. Although when you're looking at the number on a page, you already feel like it's like your brain matches that up.
Right.
So who knows? But I feel like I would have got it, but it doesn't bother me. It's not a level of sugar or sweetness that I feel like I can't drink this. It's nice.
I agree. And I think if you had blindfolded me and not told me what the rum was or where it came from, and I just tasted it, I'm not sure I would have immediately thought, oh, this is definitely sweetened. So it's not out of control sweetening. Like I said, I would love to try it without it to be able to compare. But
what I will say about the palette on it is I wouldn't call it one dimensional, but it's like 1.5 dimensions. It's just not very complicated in its palette, and there's not a lot to find there. But what is there is well done.
Yeah, I don't have anything to disagree with there. I will say the finish is better than I was expecting on it. It doesn't just immediately die like a lot of 80 proof rums do. The flavors it is giving, which is kind of more of what was on the nose. We're not going to get too deep into exhaustive notes and things like that, but it hangs around for a little bit. There's a little bit of evolution, not a ton. It's not super complex, but it's an enjoyable, easy drinking rum, particularly if what you like, if you're interested in more oak forward, barrel driven flavor in rum. I think this would appeal to that drinker. Yeah,
that's 100% right. I know we're probably going to end up saying this about a few of these, is my guess, but I wish I had this at 50%. That's my first thought is, man, I would probably love this at 50%.
The first rule of this episode, I think, John, needs to be no wishing for higher proof versions.
I guess you're right, but it's hard. It's, as the first bracket here, it's hard, but we'll see if that carries through. And I won't mention it again, or maybe I will and just piss you off. But
I'll try to hold you in check. Yeah. I think one of the interesting things with this is because these styles are so different, is how we will compare these, because they're in some way they're trying to do similar things, in other ways they're trying to do different things, and so I think a lot of it's going to come down to the value you get for the money, and also just which, to me, a big factor is going to be which is more robust at the proof, basically, which makes me wish less that it was higher proof, I think, is going to be a separator. So I'm gonna shift over to the Monty Musk now and go back to that nose. It's a really nice nose, and you also get a lot of those. There's the fruitiness, but there's also the sweeter notes, kind of like the bakery type notes, little spices.
You almost get a little doughy.
Yeah, like a banana bread kind of thing going on, as opposed to just, crazy overripe bananas. It's not that type of, rotting banana funk or anything. Maybe a little bit of coconut in there too. I didn't pick up on that as first, but I'm getting that on the nose now. I'm going to finally shut up and drink this thing.
So interestingly, as I'm drinking this one, I feel similarly that there's a, 1.5 kind of dimensions here. It's good. What it does really well. I actually think this one has less of a finish for me.
I've only had one sip, so I'm going to go back, but I'm thinking in that direction as well.
It kind of comes and goes.
Yeah, I will say this one, it's a little bit of, I don't want to go as strong as a letdown from the nose to the palate, but a lot of the fruity character I get on the nose doesn't come through as much on the palate, which is a bit of a disappointment.
You're spot on.
I do think another thing to note with these is the Monty Musk Classic Gold is I really think it's not purely designed to be a mixer at $35.99. But I do think within their range, it's probably leaning a little bit more toward mixing applications as opposed to the Brugal 1888, which is further up the Brugal range, and I think intended more to be primarily as a sipper. Whereas I think, what's the next one in the Monty Musk line? The Special Reserve? Something to that, some superlatives like that. I feel like that's probably the direct one-to-one with Brugal 1888. Which again, this isn't a perfect exercise. Part of it's what we have on hand, but we also we didn't want to completely write off rums that may skew a little bit more toward mixing, because a lot of times you can get surprises from those rums. You know, the other thing between these, I do get they're 80 proof, so you know, for drinkers like us, I don't think we're going to be like, oh, that burns. You know, I do get a little bit more of an alcohol bite from the Monty Musk than I do the Brugal, which some of that might go back to that little bit of added sugar, which irritates me a little bit. That's the part of it that like slightly feels like cheating to me when I think about it. But different rum making traditions. Okay, do you have a verdict, John?
I do. I think it's fairly close. So I don't think this is a blowout for me, but believe it or not, I think I'm going with the Brugal.
I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah,
I really thought going into this that I would end up favoring the Monty. You know, I'm trying to approach this with a blank slate, you know, fresh start for all these rums mentality. But just knowing my own tastes, I know I gravitate towards Jamaica a lot more than Dominican Republic, lighter, column still, cask-driven flavor rums, and especially ones that have a little bit of sugar added. But if I'm just judging these on which one I think is a more enjoyable sipping experience right now, I give the slight edge to Brugal 1888, just a bit of a longer finish. And there wasn't a letdown from nose to palate with that rum, and there was one with Monty Musk. If the Monty Musk palate had tasted like the nose, it would have won hands down for me, but it did not. So I'm going to give the edge to Brugal.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on all of that. I was ready to fight you on this, but it seems like we're in agreement. And this is not to say that the Monty Musk doesn't have a lot of good qualities to it. And at its price point, I do agree with you. I think it's a decent entry, right? For people who haven't experienced many Jamaican rums, you could do a lot worse than this bottle. So from that standpoint, it's nice. And it's nice to think, you know, this is our first of all the brackets. And I found them both to be decent and enjoyable.
Yeah. So, neither of these I would like absolutely turn my nose up at if I were in a position to be sipping it. So yeah, honestly, that's not really an upset because Brugal 1888 was the 8 seed. Monty Musk was a 9 seed. So you know, it's a toss-up essentially. But yeah, a little surprised that's what we went with. And we should inform listeners, you know, they're probably thinking, well, what happens if you guys disagree on a rum? How is it going to advance? I do think we'll try to reach a consensus between the two of us. But if we're just absolutely at loggerheads and one of us or both of us won't budge, we have agreed between the two of us that we'll go with price as a tiebreaker, begrudgingly. So that's our plan. We'll see how that goes and if that is tenable or not. Okay, well that was fun. I'm going to set these aside and I'm going to pull out our next two rums.
So while you do that, I'll introduce the next two. The next two is the 7 seed Havana Club 7 and the 10 seed 10 to 1 Dark. I guess we didn't do that on purpose. But Havana Club 7 is the 7.
Oh my God, I didn't even...
10 to 1 Dark is the 10.
That's hilarious. That was not intentional. I think it was just fate, maybe? Destiny? One of those things was at work.
So with the Havana Club 7, so this is an actual Cuban rum. Yes, that's hard to get here in the U.S., but...
This is not the Puerto Rico Bacardi Havana Club.
Right. So this is the Havana Club 7, which is, as you mentioned, Will, I think this one is kind of branded a little bit between the mixer/sipper. So that's a good thing to kind of keep in mind. This is made at 2 distilleries. So Santa Cruz del Norte and San Jose distilleries. And it's all column still. and aged 7 years in ex-whiskey barrels, is what they say. And then we do know that there's likely a very small amount of sugar added here. Willie, you put in the notes, the website said 0.4 grams per 100 milliliters. So wait, what does that even work out to in grams per liter?
I think I've seen on other sites that do hydrometer readings, it works out to similar to like the Brugal 1888, like somewhere around 4 grams per liter or something like that. So I think it's a similar amount of small touch of sugar added.
Got it. Okay. And then the average price we have around $30 to $32 or so, in and around there. So cheaper than both of the other seeds, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on the other side, in the next corner, it's the 10-to-1 Dark, which is a multi-country blend, an 8-year column still rum from Barbados and Dominican Republic, a high ester pot still Jamaican rum, and a column still Trinidad rum. So we don't have too much information on which distilleries, although I'm sure we could probably guesstimate a little bit. But as a multi-country blend, and I remember when we had, was it Mark Farrell from 10 to 1, he talked a lot about how he came up with this blend and what was behind it. It was meant to represent the Caribbean as a whole in an attempt to do that. And then, in fact, the name 10 to 1, 10 countries to 1 was kind of representative of that. It is a no sugar added rum. And the average price on this one a little high, little high. I thought for some of it at $44.99, which I remember seeing it for about that price here also. So, okay, so we've got those two lined up. Will, you've been starting to nose. I'm going to nose myself here.
Yeah, I started with the Havana Club 7 because, again, kind of the way I try to approach these is whichever one I think is going to be milder or subtler, that's the one I'm going to approach first. So Havana Club 7, similar style to the nose of the Brugal 1888, but a lot very different in a lot of ways too. I think a lot of people will think, okay, both, column still rums from Latin American countries, this is going to be about the same. They're very, very different.
No sherry at all here.
Yeah, no sherry at all. And also just a lot more cut and dry, I would say, with this nose. A little bit less going on, very simple and straightforward.
Agreed. But not unpleasant. Yeah.
No, not unpleasant. It does have a little bit of a nuttiness, but it's not a sherry nuttiness in it.
I agree. It's different.
It also has that kind of like wet cardboard vibe a little bit, and graham cracker is a lot of what I get with this.
I think you're right on. And what I'm actually getting out of this is scotch.
Oh, interesting.
I'm getting scotch notes out of this, whereas a lot of rums are ex-bourbon, and this one may be, for all I know, although it says ex-whiskey barrels. So maybe it's not. Maybe there is some scotch in there, but I'm getting some scotch notes out of this.
That's interesting. My brain didn't go scotch.
Specifically Speyside, but definitely, it's still a rum. I'm not mistaking it for scotch, but there's like this Speyside scotch notes in there.
Well, and I haven't explored the world of scotch as much as you have, so I don't even know if I've had a Speyside scotch or not. I think most of the ones I've had have been the peatier varieties. My understanding of Speyside is a little bit subtler.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is like Johnny Walker barrels.
Interesting. All right, so that's the nose on that one. And shifting over to the 10 to 1, the I don't know if it's just because we were sniffing the column still Cuban rum right before, but the Jamaican element of this, like I don't want to say it punches you in the face, but as much as an 80 proof rum can punch you in the face, that element of it really stands out when you transition over to this one.
This one I get much more high ester pot still notes, right? Yeah. So now I'm getting a little bit of the overripeness. Again, not punching you in the face. There's plenty of rums that we talk about that are going to do that way more than this. But for this particular rum, and so far from what we've smelled and tasted, it's very present.
Yeah, I get a little bit of that like grape soda vibe that I get from estery Jamaican rums.
Yeah, I feel you.
But I feel the Barbados component in here as well. And probably I'm picking up on the Dominican component as well. Just, those more straightforward, aged, cask-driven notes to it.
I know it sounds silly to say we're getting all of these, but I also get the Trinidad. In fact, I get the Trinidad more than the Barbados.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to go back to the Havana Club and sip that first, as I think it's likely the subtler of the two. This actually has more depth on the palate than I was expecting.
Yeah.
It has some nice, what I like to call bottom end notes. And I kind of think about that like how I think about bottom end in music, the bass that kind of anchors it a little bit.
Yeah.
Whatever
You're all about that bass.
Huh? I am, yeah, as a former bassist. Whatever taste version of that it is, there's just kind of like deeper, darker oak notes that kind of have that just bottom end. I don't know how else to describe it. I get more of that than I was expecting to get in this rum.
More bottom end than even maybe the Brugal.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think
so, yeah. But at the same time, I'm going to tell you that there's something that bothers me. It's just on the edge of getting to be too sweet. It's not, but it is right. It's got its little fingertips hitting the edge of what I would consider too sweet for my palate.
Just grasping at it.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily get. It's not on the edge for me. It is a little bit sweet, but I would say it compares favorably to me to the Brugal 1888 in terms of added sweetness. There's like a kind of varnishy quality to it, but there's also I get this note that's a little bit like cleaning product. It's not like ethanol. It's just, I don't want to say synthetic because that's too strong, but there's just something in that vein that
like Windex type of thing, Fabuloso,
or like maybe chlorine or something like that. It's just again, that's not dominating the palate, but it's just a quality that is there that my brain is noting.
Pool water, chlorine pool water.
It's interesting because I wouldn't say pool water. Pool water is actually a note that I get in a lot of, not a lot of rums, but in some rums that I really enjoy have a pool water note, like the Homesky Fiji rum that we did with Eric. That one has a pool water note to it that I really enjoy. This isn't a pool water note.
All right, I'm going to move on to the 10-1 dark here and start sipping this one.
Okay, yeah, that's nice actually. And something I think we talked about with Mark when he was on the show, which was forever ago. I think he was maybe like our 15th guest or something like that. Wow. I remember having the word dark in the name, 10-1 dark rum. We asked him about that because I think we both felt like it was being positioned as kind of a mid-market sip first, mix second kind of rum. And, probably just mix in like a spirit forward type cocktail. But when you see dark rum on there, immediately my brain goes to mixer, right? It's kind of like how I was talking about with the Monty Musk Classic Gold. When you see that gold descriptor, it just screams mixing rum to me. But and I won't rehash the whole conversation we had with Mark, but he was very aware with that. I think it was an attempt to kind of meet people where they are, because I think he really wants to attract new people to the category with this brand. All that said, the reason I bring it up is because to me, the way it drinks matches my perception of it before factoring in the dark label. It doesn't drink to me like this is primarily a mixing rum, kind of like how the Monty Musk Classic ended up drinking to me. So what are your first thoughts?
This one's not a contest for me.
Just coming right out with it.
I mean, honestly, I thought it would be much closer, if not even, the other way around. But frankly, the 10-1 dark is really bringing it at a 40% ABV. I taste in there I think I now get the Barbados on the palate. I get some of the Dominican Republic. I get for sure some of the Jamaica, and I get the Trinidad. And that's a trick to pull off in a 40% rum, to have all of those blends show up. Sorry, all of those sources show up in the blend. That's something really nice. It drinks fantastic. I would be very happy with this. Whereas the Havana Club doesn't quite get there for me in the drinking experience. I'm sure this would be great in a Cuba Libre, right? And rum and Coke. And I'm sure in mixing, I would have no problem with it. As a sipping rum, it's falling short.
My assessment is very similar to yours. I'm sure we'll run into disagreements eventually. But so far, we're in lockstep. And honestly, the first thought I was having was, we may have fucked up the seeding with 10-1.
Yeah.
This is not, how every year in like the March Madness tournament, one of like the common tropes is like, this is not your typical 10 seed, you know, like they came on late in the year. They got it together. They were injured early on. This is not a normal 10 seed. That's how I feel about this rum. It's really punching above its seeding in the bracket. And you took the words out of my mouth in that I taste all the origins in this blend, which bringing in 4 different origins, especially I think like the Jamaica, obviously, you know, that's easy to get people to taste that in the blend.
Sure.
I think the trick is getting people to be able to pick out those subtler rum traditions in there. The Trinidad, the Dominican Republic, the Barbados to a degree, but they all show up. It works really well. Do I wish it were higher proof? Yes, I'm violating my own rule here. But I do believe they released a 86 proof edition of this one as well. But this is still the standard flagship that I think is widely available. And it is, you know, it's on the higher end of a price point of what I would typically want to pay for an 80 proof rum. Right. But I will say I would not be mad at all about sipping this. I think it's a really well executed blend.
Yeah.
And yeah, it pleasantly surprised me. I actually hadn't had this. I'd only had the 10-to-1 white, which I also think is a really nice,
really good,
a really nice blended white rum too. Great for, you know, cocktails, daiquiris. The Jamaican component really comes through on that one. The Jamaican component, it's not the star of the show here. It's I don't know that any of the rums are the star of the show. They just all kind of come together, and it's just they're all working together.
Blend. Yeah. This is a boy band of rums that they're all taking their turns singing verses and comes together, and
it's a perfect a cappella group, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm excited for it. I honestly didn't think I would like it as much as I did. And Same. Like you said, it's a strong 10 seed here. So wow, I'm excited to see what happens with that the rest of the way.
Yeah, I'm just going to plug this into our sheet. These first 2 that we did, the way the bracket is set up, when you have 10 different rums, essentially the top 2 seeds will get what's called a first round bye. So they won't have to go against anyone in the first round. These first 2 that we did were essentially play-ins. So the winner of the first matchup, Rugal 1888, is going to go against the 1 seed in the next round, Eldorado 15. And the winner of that one, 10-to-1 Dark, is now going to go against the 2 seed, Admiral Rodney, HMS Royal Oak, which I'm eager to see how that goes.
That's going to be fun. Yeah,
that's going to be fun. Yeah. Okay, but we'll get to those in a couple of rounds. We're gonna squeeze in the other matchups we have in between that, which is our next one is going to be Eldorado 12 as the 4 seed versus Santa Teresa 1796 as the 5 seed, and then we're going to do Don Q Gran Reserva, the 3 seed, versus Ron Abuelo 15 Napoleon, the 6 seed. So I'm going to go ahead and place these rums back.
Yeah, we should take a quick break, set these up, and I'm going to take a cracker break.
Break. Yeah, I should probably reload on my water too. We're coming back with Santa Teresa 1796 and Eldorado 12. Let's talk about Eldorado 12 real quick, because there's the whole new Eldorado, old Eldorado thing that came up. And you just made a face. I'm not sure which rum you were nosing. I think I have a guess, but we'll come back to that.
Okay.
So this is one of the new Eldorado bottles. And this, you know, could be a whole 30-minute aside, but basically Eldorado's aged rums used to taste a lot sweeter, and now they taste a lot less sweet. Eldorado has said this is owed to their practice of aging with their house-made caramel in the barrel. This is something they say they used to do. They have since phased it out, which that's what they say is responsible for the decline in obfuscation coming up in hydrometer readings. All I can tell you, I don't, know the full story. You can listen to our interview with Sean Caleb
knows the full story. Will
you can listen to our interview with Sean Caleb to get DDL's perspective on that. But I will say, if you taste the new Eldorado versus the old Eldorado bottles, particularly the 12 and the 15, or the 2 I've done it with, the new ones taste exceptionally drier and less sweet. So this is the new Eldorado 12. This is a rum from Guyana, Demerara Distillers Limited. It's a blend of rums from the EHP wooden coffee column and the metal coffee column stills. It's aged 12 years, next whiskey barrels. And one of the like alcohol boards or whatever you want to call it in one of the European countries, I believe this is Sweden, called System Bolaget. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. Anyway, they measure all the alcohol coming into the country. They measure the new El Dorado 12, I believe, is having no added sugar, according to Rum Revelations. And the average price is somewhere in the neighborhood of $36.99, maybe up to $40 in some places. So that's the general ballpark. In the other corner, as John said, we have Santa Teresa 1796. This is a rum from Venezuela. It's a blend of heavy and light column still rum and pot still rum, which some people forget about with this particular distillery. They use Solera aging. This is kind of a true Solera setup. 100% of the rum goes through the Solera system. They say it's the rums that go into can be anywhere from 4 to 35 years old in their Solera at any given time. There is some added. This is another one of those rums with a touch of added sugar, and they actually mentioned this in a few places on their website. It says, there's a quote on there that says, when you start with the best ingredients and you employ the highest caliber of craftsmanship, you don't need to mask the flavors with a load of sugar. That's why a bottle of Santa Teresa 1796 contains less than half a teaspoon of sugar, guaranteeing an unexpectedly dry finish. The FAQ of the website also has a question, does Santa Teresa 1796 have added sugar? The response kind of cracked me up a little bit because it was a very politician-like response. It says, Santa Teresa 1796 is a rich and refined rum with a dry finish. Independent measurements made with hydrometers have determined that Santa Teresa 1796 contains maximum 4 grams of sugar per liter versus other super premium brands containing up to 20 grams of sugar. So it doesn't say yes or no, and it acknowledges the independent hydrometer tests and then just kind of compares it, saying basically like, well, it doesn't have a ton in there, basically, which, to their credit is something you and I have said. If there's going to be some in there, at least let it be a small amount. And so I think that's what this is, about 4 grams per liter, according to hydrometer readings. Average price, somewhere in the neighborhood of $45.99 to $50, somewhere in that ballpark.
This one, like the others, is 2 different traditions, right? Now you have Guyana, which is a different tradition on its own, kind of, and Santa Teresa, which is more akin to the Spanish heritage style rums of the Brugal that we tried from Dominican Republic and Havana Club from Cuba. Yeah.
But having said that, it is a little bit of its own thing because it has the pot still component in it.
That's true.
Which I don't believe El Dorado 12 has any of their pot still distillate in it. So, okay, I got to ask you to go first because you're just like viscerally reacting to the nose of what I'm thinking is the Santa Teresa 1796. So tell the people what you're going through right now.
Santa Teresa deserves better. The actual Saint Teresa. Because, my goodness, I'm really struggling with this nose. I do not like anything at all about this. It is off-putting.
In what way? Like, what are you getting if you had to describe it that is off-putting?
Chemicals.
Yeah.
I'm getting chemicals, like synthetic and concrete, but in a bad way.
I like that you imply that normally concrete is like a really good thing.
I've had some like wet asphalt type of notes before in a Caroni and others that can be desirable, but I don't personally like those, as you know. Yeah. But it's better than this. This is not good.
I have kind of a checkered history with this rum. I think we did an episode super early on where I was saying like this. I was talking about I just did not click with this rum. I didn't get the appeal at all. And then I came back to it a few times and I was like, okay, I can kind of see why this is a little bit enjoyable. I warmed up to it again. I feel like I'm boomeranging back to my original stance. It just going off the nose though. So I'm going to keep an open mind before I sip it. But there is just some like, it's like if you combined something chemically with something very musty. Right. There is like an oaky mustiness, which I think I would typically think of as a prized note to pick up on.
Right. But this is not a good musty. This is like something got left in the fridge too long.
Yeah, there's almost like a wet dog, I want to say a little bit.
Yeah, wet dog. Yeah, I get wet dog. You nailed it, I think. All right. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, stop punishing yourself. We can sniff the El Dorado 12.
But by the way, Will, I have to say, the new Santa Teresa that just came out, remember I had talked about that one on a recent episode, I very much liked that. And that one,
what was the difference with that one?
It was a Speyside whiskey cask finish, if I remember correctly.
And I think it was higher proof. Wasn't it like 90
and it was,
proof?
It was higher proof, yes. So I'm not like, trying to trash anything here. I'm just giving you my raw reactions.
Okay, well, the El Dorado 12, I don't want to go as strong as saying a breath of fresh air, but there's a lot of nice things going on with this
There really
nose.
is. It's a nice, complex nose. Fruitiness is coming out of bounds, but a different fruitiness than a Jamaican rum.
Definitely. It's almost grapefruity. It's similar to that grapefruit note I get in some of the Mauritius rums from Gray's Distillery, but I get coconut, Sharpie.
But I'm closer to like a stone fruit, like a peach or an apricot.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, apricot's a good call. Mm-hmm. And there's just like there's a nuttiness, like a roasted. Like those places you walk by in the mall that serve the roasted nuts and the like cones. That kind of smell. It's
get your cone of nuts. Yep.
Yeah, that smells so good, but it's that mingled with the fruit that we just talked about.
Like a caramel kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a caramel thing. Almost like a toffee.
Mm-hmm. Toffee is a good word.
Toffee popcorn. My wife works for a company that actually makes toffee popcorn. So,
really?
Yeah. Nashville Toffee Company. Good. It's very good. Free advertisement for Nashville Toffee Company. They ship. Go to the website, order it.
I'm less experienced with the El Dorado 12 than I am with the 15. Mm-hmm. I feel like I know the 15 well. Yeah. I didn't know the 12 as well. Just, I think the buying habit was like, well,
you if I get skipped right past it.
Yeah, and this was very early on in my rum experience where I was like, well, I can either buy the 12 or the 15. The 15's only a few bucks more. Fuck it, I'll go with that.
Yeah,
and never went back to the 12 to even consider it. And now I'm sad and mad that I didn't because I'm really enjoing this as a nose.
It's a delightful nose.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. What do we want to try first?
I mean, let's get the.
don't say. You got to go with an open mind, man. Don't say you got to get it over with.
I mean, that nose is hard to overcome. Yeah, but let's start with the Santa Teresa, and I'm going to do my best here and try to give it a fair shake.
Very convincing.
It's just awful. Even going into... I'm sorry, Will. I'm so sorry.
You're normally not this critical about stuff. I feel like this is just really not agreeing with you whatsoever.
No, I wasn't able to even get to the palate there because I smelled it on the way in. All right, I'm going back in. I'm going to try. No, it's way, way, way over oaked, over tannинed.
Really?
I think is what that is.
Really?
I think that's over tannin.
Wow. I feel like I'm having a completely different experience right now.
Really? No, nasty barrel. Like, not good, like charcoaly, nasty. Like, I've used this barrel 10 times now. This is the 11th time. And there's, it's crumbling and it's gross.
Wow. Man. Yeah, I don't get those off-putting barrel characteristics that you're describing. What I do get is it's quite more one-dimensional than I remember it being. But I just get like a very... And when I say a sweetness, I actually... Again, if I were blindfolded, I might not have guessed that this had any sugar added to it. It doesn't drink as an overly sweet rum. It is a fairly dry rum, actually, as the marketing copy states. But it's just a very just kind of generic sweetness profile that I get. Almost a honeyish a little bit. You get some of the oak, some of the barrel characteristics, a little graham cracker maybe, but it's just...
You're being too kind.
No, I'm being honest.
So here, I think I've nailed it. Do you know when you have a campfire and the wood has been burning for so long that it turns white? Like it like literally just becomes kind of like ash?
Yeah.
This is that flavor to me. This is like they took a barrel, charred the crap out of it to the point where it was ash, and then poured this rum through that. And then filtered it because, they want to get all that stuff out. That's what this tastes like to me.
When you say ashy, I do get a quality that I could see describing as ashy, but it's not like an overly burned, charred kind of ashy. It's more going back to that musty sort of note that I got on the nose. But I actually, the chemical quality we were talking about, I don't get that as much at all on the palate. So
agreed.
To me, once I get past the nose, I kind of see the appeal to this in a very approachable, sweet profile, but not sweetness and like a sugary, syrupy sweetness. It just has kind of like sweet barrel vanilla kind of notes to it that I think are accessible is what I would say, the palate of this rum. To me, that's what I'm getting, which I know your experience sounds completely different. And sometimes that happens, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes you try things on different days and different nights and you get different reactions to it. For whatever reason, tonight, it's not happening for me. I have tried this rum before. I remember the first time I encountered it at a rum festival, I did not like it. I do remember that. Similar to your experience, I remember trying it another time and being okay with it, kind of like, okay. And then tonight, it's just nothing about this is agreeing with me. I would say. Yeah, I would say that maybe there's something on the late mid palate and finish that it's getting better. So there's something redeeming in it. It's not garbage, but the initial it can't overcome that initial bad nosing and initial palate flavor. It's way too much. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to the El Dorado 12 cherry cough syrup. I just want to remember that note. I got like a big hit of that on the palate.
This is another one where I get wheated bourbon notes also. So like Maker's Mark, but it's very good. I'm enjoying it.
It is, yeah. And it does, in my memory, drink drier than these El Dorados did in the past. I don't have the old El Dorado 12 to compare it to it 1-to-1. Although the El Dorado 15 that we're going to be doing is actually the old El Dorado 15. So that should be an interesting comparison. Yeah, I mean... The one hydrometer, or I don't even think it was a hydrometer reading. I think it was a step beyond that because it was like a Swedish government, I think, doing it that picked up little to no additives. Honestly, I think I buy it.
I do too. I'm not detecting anything. Of course, putting it up against a rum that probably does have even a tiny bit of sugar is almost unfair because I think your brain can't help but do that comparison quickly. But that said, it really does drink like a solid dry rum, and I wouldn't have thought twice.
And I mean, if you are into aged rums, you get the depth from the casks, the 12 years of aging. But if you don't like rums that are overly woody, I do think there's the fruity characteristics that we mentioned on the nose, to me, come through on the palate. Like I was saying, I got that kind of cherry cough syrup thing on the palate. It's a treat. It's a really, and I think for the price, it's definitely a rum I would recommend to people who are, especially people newer to the category, who are wanting to get their feet wet without spending a bunch of money, but also get something that's quality. Maybe people who aren't into cask strength stuff.
Yeah.
This would be an easy recommend.
Right. And this is going from memory, but it's very different enough from El Dorado 15, right? So I know we're going to, do the 15 soon so we can kind of revisit, but in my memory, at least, you shouldn't look at these two and say, well, that's just a rum that's 3 years older and it's going to be similar but more, aged. It's quite different.
Well, and the 15 has, Port Morant and Versailles still in it, so that's a different component. Although I do think it has some of the EHP and maybe some of the metal coffee still components as well. I do, in my memory, 15 has some different dimensions, but it'll be interesting to compare the old 15 to the new 12. At some point, we'll come back and, I've had the new 15, but comparing those will be fun as well. All right. So I don't think we need a super long discussion. The El Dorado 12 seems like the clear advancer here, unless you've had a change of heart.
No question.
Okay.
El Dorado moves forward.
Okay. So that moves forward. So I'm going to get my next ones out.
I'll go over the next bracket here. So this is going to be the Don Q Gran Reserva, which used to be called Gran Añejo, I believe, and now it's Gran Reserva. So you might see some of those old bottles.
I think the Gran Reserva bottle still also says like Añejo XO on it, maybe. Mm-hmm. So Añejo is still on there, but I think it leads with Gran Reserva now.
Yeah, and that's the 3 seed versus the Ron Abuelo 15. This is the Napoleon casks. If you know the Ron Abuelo line, the 15 has 3 different finishes. There's the Napoleon, the tawny port cask, and the sherry cask. I can't remember what the other names are, but essentially the Napoleon's the cognac version. So this is the number 6 seed. So I'll go through these real quick as you're setting up. For the Don Q, in this corner, it's a Puerto Rican rum from Distillería Serralles. So we're pretty familiar with that. And people who listen to the podcast know a lot of Don Q. It's a blend of heavy and light column still rums. So that's an interesting note there, that this isn't all light column. We've talked about how Don Q makes different marks, and there's a blend of that heavy rum in there. There's a blend of it aged 9 to 12 years in X whiskey, and Solera rums aged up to 50 years in sherry casks. That's a pretty big claim, up to 50 years in sherry casks.
Yeah, I believe they set up their sherry Solera in 1954, sometime around there.
Yeah,
and have just been topping it up ever since. So,
right.
I think, there's some rum in there that could be decades and decades and decades old.
Yeah, I don't know that I buy that. But that's a separate podcast topic. Not from Don Q. I'm just saying the Solera method altogether.
So okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk more about that at another time, but no sugar added to this product. So Don Q, famous for no sugar added to their rums. And the average price on this one's, it's a bit expensive. This one is over $50 pretty much everywhere. $54.99, the rough average price. Does come in a very beautiful bottle, I have to say. I'm a fan of the bottling, both the old and the new. So really, really nice. To my knowledge, Will, and maybe just to verify with you, the old and the new are the same liquid. It's just a different bottle.
That's my understanding. I haven't heard anything different, but yeah.
Okay, so, and then in the other corner here, we have Ron Abuelo 15 Napoleon, which is a Panamanian rum. This is a column still product. The label on it says it's aged a full 15 years, but we know they also use a combination of Solera aging, so... a little fudging there. We're not really sure. They use the Roman numerals, by the way. 15 makes it feel more official, maybe.
Yeah, although if you look in the bottom right corner of the front label, it also says aged 15 years using standard numerals. So
okay.
Yeah, I read some stuff online that Abuelo's age statements are actually average age statements as opposed to minimum. I think there's a Master of Malt article that says Abuelo's age statements are averages, not minimum. So, for example, the XV contains rums between 8 and 43 years old. It's aged for an average of 14 years and then finished for a further year. So I think it's saying the finish, which this one is in cognac casks, is around a year. And supposedly the average of the Solera product is 14 years.
Yeah.
But again, I don't... Like, if you go by the label, that's not what the label is saying. The label is straight up saying it's 15 years. So who is to say?
Yeah. Well, I think we'll say after we taste it. It's, as we mentioned, finished in cognac casks, so it has that influence, as you mentioned, for roughly a year. And then we do want to mention Rum Revelations. The site measured this one at 16 grams per liter of added sugar. So I believe, is this the highest amount of added sugar we've had so far?
The highest by far. I think all the ones we've done so far have been around 4 grams per liter. So this is like 4 times that, essentially. So this is the first one that... to me is veering, just looking at the number, that's veering into territory where my brain is already telling me that's probably going to be too sweet. I'm trying to ignore that and just approach it, but just being honest. Yeah.
And then interestingly, it's also the priciest so far.
Yes.
The average price of this one's about $75 in most places, which I've seen, that's about right, $70 to $75 for any one of the 3 of these pretty much. So, all right. So getting that out of the way now, let's go ahead and nose these and see what we think.
Yeah, I've been nosing these while you've been kind of introducing them. And the Don Q nose is it's like what I was hoping for from the other column still rums, like the Havana Club 7.
Really?
And the Santa Teresa was the other one, even though that one does have the pot still component. But it's very light, cask driven, like we were saying. And I get a little bit, not as much, interestingly, in the Brugal 1888, I got more of the sherry than I get from this one. I don't know if that's what you're experiencing as well.
Yep. No, I think you're right there.
But that nuttiness is there.
It is. It's just far lighter. I would straight up say it's fine. It doesn't bother me in terms of nose. Like, there's nothing bad about it.
Yeah.
It's just I have to kind of go hunting for it.
Yeah.
And it's not something that's, reaching out to meet me at all. It's just kind of, okay.
Now, the Abuelo, very different experience on the nose. This is not one where you have to kind of hunt for things.
Yeah.
And like I said, I have a checkered history with Santa Teresa 1796 on this podcast. I also have a checkered history with cask finishes. on this podcast.
Yeah,
and
you do.
This just going off the nose is what I typically do not like in cask finishes, where I feel like I'm getting a lot of notes that are less about rum and more about the cask finish itself.
I gotta agree with you here. And I'm more kind to cask finishes than you are generally.
But it's very heavy, right?
It's heavy.
Yeah, very heavy on the cognac cask finish there.
Well, we've talked about this before, about if you're going to do a finish, like you have this choice to make of like, are you going to hit people with it so that they know it's there and you don't there's no mistaking it, versus like it's so light that whether or not people actually appreciate it or not is a question.
Yeah.
And striking that right balance for people is tough.
Well, and preferences vary. I was just talking to a liquor store owner the other day who I think has a really good palate and whose opinion I respect a lot. And he was like, when I get a cask finish product, I want the cask finish to hit me in the face. I want it to taste different. I don't want it to be subtle, basically. And my opinion is basically the opposite of that. So, no approach is necessarily, no approach is wrong, but I want to be able to detect it, but I don't want it to be, I want it to elevate the rum, not just be like, oh, there's cognac or, oh, there's sherry, Yeah. And on the nose of this, that's what I'm getting. It's just kind of like dominating. So I'm going to taste the Don Q first.
Yeah. I'm going to taste both of these.
Actually, going back to the nose on the Don Q is like, it's like putting on a very comfy, familiar jacket, sort of. It's like, oh, yeah, okay. I know this guy.
Agreed. I just wonder if he's too boring to have conversation with.
Wow. The palate for me on this one reveals a lot that the nose did not.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to rhyme there. But the sherry comes through a lot more, but in a way that I really enjoy.
It's actually quite good.
Yeah.
There's no mistaking when you get a palate that is a quality made product. It kind of hits you. You kind of know. And that's what I'm getting from this.
It's like it concentrates on the palate. It's like everything just comes together. And honestly, like, I didn't expect to say this, but there's an intensity of flavor with this. Not intense, like, obviously, if you compare this to rum fire or something, I'm not talking about that intensity, but I'm talking about for an 80 proof rum, there's a concentration of flavor on the palate that hits you right away and lasts, that I really enjoy. It's I would call this an elegant rum, John.
I really wish I could disagree with you, but I think I don't find it quite as complicated or complex as I would like a rum to be of this price point.
I would agree. It's not overly. It's not the most complex rum I've ever had. It's straightforward.
Elegant is the right word. So, and I'm going to pull in my board game hobby here real quick to just say that even in board games, you have really complicated games that we call crunchy. You can really sick your teeth into them and get through it, and they take 3.5 hours to play or more, and those are great experiences that you cherish. On the other hand, there's an elegant type of game that doesn't have a whole lot of rules to it, but somehow the experience is more than the set of rules is. Right. Yeah. And that's what's happening here, I think, to your point about it being elegant. It's got more than the sum of its parts when you just it's fine on the nose. Like I said, I'm not over the moon with it. It's great. It's good. Not great. It's good. But yeah, when you sip it, you're just appreciating it.
Yeah. The palate, I would agree. The nose is fine. The palate is great, I would say. For what this rum is trying to deliver, and find me, whatever. Yes, I would like to experience this at a higher ABV.
Yep.
But for an 80 proof rum, this is really delivering quality. And so just going back to the original question, if you're looking for 80 proof rums that deliver, this for me is firmly in that category.
Interestingly, and we don't have any of the other Don Q products in this bracket, I would love to do more with just the Don Q lineup, because in the past, I've found that this one is diminished slightly in comparison to others that they offer.
I wouldn't expect this to be in any, in my memory, this completely blows the 7 out of the water in terms of what it's delivering. If I were comparing it to some like the single barrel releases, that's where I think it might get some competition.
Yeah. So at some point we'll have to, put a pin in that one, and we'll come back to it. All right, moving on to the Ron Abuelo 15, the Napoleon, which, by the way, apropos for the moment, because the new movie, Napoleon, just coming out, Ridley Scott. Yeah, are you going to see that?
Joaquin Phoenix? Probably not, to be honest. I don't know. It's just, I'm basing this on, seeing 10-second clips of the trailer here and there, not really paying attention. But I don't know. I just see Joaquin Phoenix in the hat, and it just, something about it feels like an SNL skit. I don't know. I just can't take it that seriously. So, and I've heard about, historians are very, there's a bunch of stuff that didn't really happen. He's firing cannons at the pyramids and stuff like that. So I don't know. For me, it's going to be a pass.
I'm going to see it. It's definitely the Cliff Note version of Napoleon, right? And there's some things there that, just kind of like an added sugar rum, where it's kind of like, oh, okay, you put that shot in there of them firing at the pyramids as an added sugar into that. But I'm seeing a reaction as you tried this one. That's going to be fun to talk about in a second. But I'm still going to see it because I think Ridley Scott brings visual quality to the medium that you don't get from many directors now, and it's a tentpole film that we don't get very often. So I'm hoping it is better than its trailer. I'm hoping that it puts together a nice story. So all right, let's move on from that and talk about one of my
all-time favorites, by the way, Alien.
Alien is great. Yeah,
that's Ridley Scott, right?
Yes. Okay. Now I hope I'm getting it right. I'm pretty sure it was Ridley Scott. I'm pretty
sure it is. Yeah. One of my favorite movies. Okay. Oh yeah, this is the first rum I've had a visceral reaction to. And yes, I think it's a couple of factors. The first thing that hit me was the cask finish, which, just like the nose to me on the palate, is very heavy-handed. And then what hit me after that was just a wave of syrupy sweetness that's just too much for me. I could have a couple of sips of this, but beyond that, it's just, I almost get a cola kind of finish on it,
There is a cola finish on this, yeah.
It's just too much for me.
So I'm going to be kinder to it than you are. It is too sweet. It's funny seeing you scrunch your face up as you taste that. It's undoubtedly too sweet for us, I think. So I'm not even arguing that. But there's still something about it that, I don't hate it. I hated the Santa Teresa.
Yeah, I feel like our reactions are perfectly inversed on this rum versus a Santa Teresa. Where this one for me, I stomached a second sip. I really don't want to go back for a third sip, so I think I'm going to pass on that. It's just the heavy hit you over the head with the hammer cognac finish at the beginning. And like I said, after that, it's just sweet. So
see, I'm getting lingering tastes of tobacco in the back, and maybe a little bit of oak or some character in there as well. Totally agree. Not only do you get sweet, but you get cognac, right? So it's where's the rum a little bit?
Yeah. And what I get a little on the finish is sweet tea, actually. And I'm talking about going to a barbecue place in backwoods Alabama and getting a glass of sweet tea that tastes like it has the whole bag of sugar poured into it. That's what I get, which is a very comforting flavor from my childhood. But
I can see it.
Not what I'm looking for in a rum, unfortunately.
Look, I can see why people like this. I can see why after years and years, it's still being put out on the market at $75, which is a lot of money for this. So from that standpoint,
I understand if people have a sweet tooth, if they really don't like any kind of burn or anything from alcohol, I could understand the appeal. I don't understand $75. I mean, I understand why they're doing it. I don't understand paying that much for it, because to me, it tastes like a cheapened, watered down product. But that's just me. So not knocking it if it's what you like. I'm just saying, for me, I would never buy a bottle of that.
It comes in a box, though, Will.
You know how much I love boxes. Sorry, I had to go back to the Don Q just to cleanse myself.
Well, I think we've got a winner in this one too. Am I?
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot we were supposed to do, like. It seemed pretty obvious. Go. The real fights I think are going to come on the next round, where the winners go head to head. So
yes,
okay. Don Q wins that round. We have 2 left here.
Well, yeah, the 2 number 1 seeds against the winners.
Are we already on to that?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, we're just moving. Yeah. No, you're correct. We're going to go to we're on to retasting a few rums we've already done.
Yeah.
So we're going to do Admiral Rodney, HMS Royal Oak versus 10-1 Dark, which advanced from the first round. So this will be a 2 seed versus a 10 seed. So I'm going to pull these rums over to me.
I was going to say, let's take a quick break, cracker break, and a pour break.
Right. Okay, so we're doing Admiral Rodney, HMS Royal Oak versus 10-1 Dark. And just to give an update on the bracket, the winner of this one will go on to face Don Q Gran Añejo, which just beat Ron Abuelo XV Napoleon. And then we're going to do El Dorado 15 versus Brugal 1888. The winner of that will go on to face El Dorado 12, which just bested Santa Teresa 1796. So, John, I know you are a very big Admiral Rodney guy. From the bottle to the rum itself. We just had a disagreement over which bottle is better between Admiral Rodney and the El Dorado 12 and 15 bottles. So we won't rehash that. It's just safe to say that we disagree. But let's nose these up. I'm gonna go after the Admiral Rodney since that one is less familiar to me, since we just already tried the 10-1 Dark. While we're doing this, I should note Admiral Rodney is a brand from our friends at St. Lucia Distillers. Also, the Chairman's Reserve brand comes from them, Bounty Rums. Admiral Rodney is sort of their, I hate to use the marketing terms, but kind of like a more premium brand from them, I would say.
Yeah.
A little bit higher price than the Chairman's line, with the exception of like the 1931?
1931.
Okay. Sorry. Trying to remember all these numbers in my head. With the exception of some of the Chairman's releases, the Admiral Rodney releases tend to be a bit more higher priced. Unlike the Chairman's releases, many of which feature some of the distillery's various pot stills, the Admiral Rodney line is all from the twin coffee column still at St. Lucia Distillers. And this particular release, the HMS Royal Oak, is a blend of rums aged 7 to 12 years in ex-bourbon casks. There is no sugar added. Average price somewhere in the neighborhood of around $77.99. I think generally in that like 75 to 80 range is where you'll typically find this rum. So like we were saying, probably up there with the Abuelo in terms of the priciest that we've done so far.
Yeah, and they're clearly marketing this as like ultra mega super premium, right? I don't know that, how to better say that, but we say a lot of like premium and super premium rums are an actual category for like sales. But this is clearly on the top end with regards to just how they present it, the box and the bottle. And it's interesting to note, I think you mentioned this is all the coffee column still. And they've said in other times that I've heard them talk about it's from the certain plates within the coffee still that make it slightly different than the other rums that they produce. And that gives it more characteristics for what it is.
They can pull the rum from different plates and create distinctive distillates all from the same still by doing that. So, this has Royal Oak in the name, John, and Royal Oak is how I would describe the nose on this. It's an oak forward,
super oak
nose. Yep. I don't mean to say that it's over oaked, but it's almost reminiscent of some Foursquare rums to me in their oakiness.
Yeah, I mean it's got a clear direction, and that is, as you mentioned, it's kind of in the name. And it's interesting to say that this is one of 3 that they have in terms of aged blends. The Admiral Rodney line.
They also have the Princessa and the Formidable.
Right.
Formidable.
Right. Is it Formidable? I don't know. But this is the middle one, and importantly, this was the first one. Right, so this was the first Admiral Rodney release, and I think what they were going for was that kind of oak forward, very, I don't know, typically is the wrong word, but aged rum. Yeah. When you think of an aged rum. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting like pencil shavings.
Yes.
I'm getting a little bit of coconut character to it. Or as some like to say, oakanut.
Oakanut.
Yeah. It's a really pleasant nose, especially if you're into oak forward aged rums. It's one that I think will really agree with you. And really, For an 80 proof rum, I do think that it packs a nose on it. Mm-hmm. Like if I were doing this blind, I probably would have thought that this were, more like 90 proof, I would say.
Interesting.
Just judging on the intensity of flavor on the nose there.
Yeah, it's bringing it, like you said. I don't feel like there's a whole lot there other than the oak, though. So
I do get that little bit of coconut in there, but yeah, it's very. It's mostly oak and like oak associated characteristics like vanilla, things like that. So
it's very, very prototypical, quintessential aged rum oak flavor, but good.
Yeah. When I go back to the 10-1, just the fruit leaps out at me. I think that's a good contrast.
It is actually a really good contrast. I'm enjoying both of these right now and going back and forth.
All right. I'm going to dive into the Admiral Rodney. I will say the initial sip, there was a wave of flavor that came at me.
Yeah.
After the initial hit on the palate that I would say is atypical of 80 proof rums. The finish, a little bit more in line with a quality 80 proof rum. Like it's a good finish, but it's kind of like it's an 80 proof finish,
Yeah. When we had Maggie Campbell on, it reminded me that I can't remember when it was that we were talking to her, or maybe it was even a Florida Rum Society event way back in the day. She mentioned if a rum makes you salivate, like your salivation glands are going, there's something good there, and like you got to pay attention to that. And she was talking specifically, now I'm remembering, about selecting different barrels and like how you can kind of find some of the good stuff, and this is doing that for me.
This one does make me salivate. Yeah.
It's just great. I'm really enjoying the palate on it. It is what I remember it to be. Yes, I'm going to go to what we shouldn't say we were going to want to do. Yes, I want it to be higher strength. But man, it's really, really good. It's got a great balance of flavor there.
Balance.
The flavor comes. Yes, balance is exactly what I would use to describe this. This is it is balanced in the force in all ways. Really, just can't say anything bad about it. You know what? I'll say one thing bad.
Oh, what's that?
$77.99 is kind of expensive.
It is, yeah. It is a bit pricey, which is my main criticism of the Admiral Rodney line. But having said that, this rum really isn't doing anything wrong flavor-wise. And you remember I was talking earlier about, maybe it was Havana Club 7 that I brought up the idea of bottom end. This is like when you listen to a perfectly mixed album. And it's got the highs, it's got the lows, it's got the mids. Everything is just, the drums are over here doing their thing, the guitar's over here, everything's got its own space. It all comes together. It's a refined rum, I would say.
Yeah.
Which speaks to the quality of blending they have over there at St. Lucia Distillers.
It's a feat to get as much out of a 40% rum as they've gotten out of it. All right, I'm jumping back into the 10-1 to see how this compares.
Yeah, I'm interested. Again, I think this is when the tougher decisions are going to come into play. Because this is another one that really impressed us in the first round.
Mm-hmm. Boy, these are good.
That's a good rum. Yeah. This is tougher sooner than I expected.
Yeah.
Even though I just said I expected it to get tough now, this is feeling really tough.
Yep. These are good. I'm going to go back and forth.
Because the 10-1, what it does is it has some of those oak characteristics that it brings, but it also brings a degree of fruit that I don't get from Admiral Rodney. Not to say there's no fruit with the Admiral Rodney, but there isn't this type which the Jamaican rum is bringing to this blend.
Agreed. I think that speaks to the style of what's included in the blend, but I get where you're going. I will say this. I'm going back and forth between the two of them. And what I'm finding is I think the 10-1 dark is slightly more muted for me, which is a characteristic I would associate with 40% rums typically.
I think Admiral Rodney, when you mention the word you just used for 10-1, what was that?
Muted.
Mm-hmm. I would say it's a little more subdued than the Admiral Rodney, which is interesting because I think because it has a Jamaican rum component, the first place your mind goes is, it's a little bit more funky, a little bit more out there. And like it does have that fruitiness that I was talking about, but the finish on the Admiral Rodney, I think, is superior.
It is.
And what it has packaged together, it does a little bit better job delivering that than the 10-1 does. But again, looking at the price points, 77-ish, between 75, 80 for Admiral Rodney, HMS Royal Oak. The 10-1 hovering more around $45, somewhere in that neighborhood. So very different price points, but I can see why, relative to the market, Admiral Rodney is charging more. I still think it's a little bit too pricey for an 80 proof rum. Yeah. But to me, I think I'm ready to say that it's there won't be another upset with 10-1. I'm leaning more toward Admiral Rodney. There's like a look of relief coming across your face.
To me, it wasn't really a contest. I think 10-1 did come in with it is good. You know that they were going to put up a fight, using this terminology of if we're like a sport. They didn't just lay down. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I think the Admiral Rodney is just too strong.
10-1 played its heart out. It left it all on the field.
Exactly. Yeah.
Every sports cliche you can think of.
I love this rum. I love Admiral Rodney's rum. It does give you the St. Lucia, right? You get an immediate sense of St. Lucia. I tell people all the time, if you're going to jump into St. Lucia, this is the one you start with, even though it's pricier, where you and I differ. You talk about the legacy with the Chairmans.
Yeah.
And I don't get me wrong. I think that one's great. And I get that you're going to spend half as much on it. But when you're looking for what you feel like is a super premium experience, there's just something that this Admiral Rodney is doing that I can't get from anywhere else, and I just love it for that.
See, to me, the essence of St. Lucia Distillers, it's those pot stills.
Yeah,
and so I want a product that has a little bit of that in it.
It's fair.
To me, what they can do with the column stills is awesome. And I really like there's a master selection release that Florida Rum Society did a few years ago that was all column still. Love that release. It's really good. And so I think what they can do with the column still is really cool. To me, it's a little bit, it's funny because unique is supposed to be one of those words where like something can't be less unique or more unique. It's just unique, just means one of one. Right. But to me, the column still is a little bit less unique than what they can accomplish with the pastas. That doesn't mean one is better than the other. I'm just saying, like, when I think of St. Lucia, I think of that Vendome. I think of the John Doerr, is the first thing. So that's why I think I gravitate more towards the legacy releases. But I think for a certain type of drinker, especially someone who maybe isn't as into funky, more offbeat flavors, even though I wouldn't describe the legacy as funky or offbeat, those pot stills are definitely capable of some funky offbeat flavors. So I could totally see starting someone on Admiral Rodney before point. Like for me, it all depends on the person and
that's
what they like. So, but this is really, I have a bottle of the HMS Princessa downstairs, and obviously I'm not doing a 1-to-1 comparison, but this in my memory of the Princessa blows it out of the water.
Yep. I remember trying all three at a rum event, and my favorite is actually still the Royal Oak, but that's not because the Formidable is bad. I think the Formidable starts to age into a little bit too oak forward for me.
Just too formidable.
This is the right balance. Yeah. Whereas the Princess is a little too young. Yep. All right. So we've got a winner here?
Yeah, we do. It's the Admiral Rodney Royal Oak. That means next up we have El Dorado 15 versus Brugal 1888.
Finally, the one seed makes an appearance in the tournament. The one seed El Dorado 15. I'm going to talk a little bit about El Dorado 15 now and give you the information, although I think most people are pretty familiar with it. This is the 15 Special Reserve, 15 years old, from Guyana, Demerara Distillers Limited, DDL. It's a blend of rums from the EHP Wooden Coffee Column Still, the Metal Coffee Still, and the Port Morant and Versailles Wooden Pot Stills. So there's quite a few different stills that go into this blend and make it what it is.
They call it Versailles in Guyana, by the way, so don't email us telling us we don't know how to pronounce French. We know we don't know how to pronounce French, but we do know how to pronounce Versailles. But in Guyana, they call it the Versailles still. So on this podcast, we call it the Versailles still.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. Saved us some hate mail there. So Aged 15 years, as we said, in ex-whiskey barrels is what they say. So it could be bourbon, could not be. And this is the big one. This is the old El Dorado blend. So this one I picked up a few years back. As Will mentioned when we talked about the 12, we won't rehash all of that, but there's the new blends, both the aged 15 and the 12. And this is the old one. So according to at least Rum Revelations, there is as much as 40 gallons per liter of added sugar in this.
Not gallons.
Oh, sorry. We've had a good amount to drink here at this point. Grams per liter, 40 grams per liter, not gallons. We've seen in other places 30 or 31, 20, even as low as 20 in some places that say. So, Will, you'd say this one's probably a little all over the map with that?
Well, and I think this goes back to El Dorado's prior method, according to them, of aging with caramel in the barrel. I don't know that that's as straightforward as just adding sugar to the rum. So it's one of those things where, I don't know, in my mind, I haven't had old El Dorado 15 in quite a while, but I remember it being on the sweeter side, but I don't remember it being 40 grams per liter sweet, which would put it sweeter than like the Ron Abuelo, for example. So I'm interested to see how this compares, and we'll have to come back at some point and try the new El Dorado with this exercise as well. But we've already seen with the new El Dorado 12 that, wow, dry doesn't strike me as overly sweet and a really pleasant drinking experience. So let's see how this one contrasts with that. But we'll nose it first. Wow, my first thought is like El Dorado 12 plus Port Morant. It's just like we just said, that's what it is. Obviously, it has the Versailles in there too, but it's like you get that mossy green banana Port Morantiness to it.
It's very recognizable if you've had a Port Morant, single
eucalyptus a little bit,
right?
Yeah.
So it's I would guess it's heavy on that, or just that's so dominant that no matter what you put in it, you're gonna
I would guess that's still like a small component of the overall blend, but that is just it's so influential, and I'm hoping that translates to the palate because it's awesome on the nose.
Really, really nice nose.
Yeah, just really good. I mean, for an 80 proof rum, a great nose. It really jumps out.
It's so present, right?
It jumps out of the glass, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to contrast that with the Brugal. Interestingly, it's a simpler nose.
Yeah.
But it doesn't get it's not like it gets completely destroyed like I was expecting it to. It's still, it's a nice nose. It's just, it's a different thing.
It is a different thing in certain ways, and yet in other ways, I'm finding some similarities. I mean, you can't discount the sherry in the Brugal, but there's something there that I kind of, like you said, I expected it to be much broader in terms of the difference, and it's really not. It's holding up in the nose.
I think it's in terms of intensity, they're completely different noses in terms of what they've got going on. And I do think, for me, the El Dorado 15 is a more complex nose. Yes. There's more stuff going on. There's more things to explore and pick out. The Brugal's a little more straightforward, but it does have a nice punch to it for an 80 proof rum.
Now I'm getting a cinnamon note that I didn't get before in the first round on it.
Oh, yeah.
On the Brugal.
Yeah, I see that a little bit.
It's light, but it's there.
All right. I'm going to go back to the Brugal first for this, just because I do think it's probably the lighter of the two profiles.
It's good.
This is actually kind of what I want or expect Santa Teresa 1796 to be.
Wow. That's fighting words there.
Like, I think it does a similar job as that rum in terms of approachability, in terms of sweet, everyday, common flavors.
Yeah.
The finish does kind of, I don't know, after we've been doing some of these rums that we're more enthusiastic about, the finish definitely leaves me wanting.
I agree.
So,
you're right.
All right, let's check out the El Dorado 15.
Wow. Interesting.
I'm just going to say it's too sweet.
Oh, I was wondering if you were going to come out with it.
It's too sweet.
It's a little sweet, but I don't find it to be Boom Boo sweet or Diplomatico Reserva Exclusiva sweet. I think it's less sweet than that. But yes, the sweetness is almost getting in the way of the complicated palate that I want.
And that's the thing that annoys me with this rum is like, I know the underlying components have so much to offer, but the sweetness almost dumbs them down.
Overtakes it. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes the interestingness out of it and just gives you the smooth, polished edge to it that is like actually what I get on the nose, that Port Morentiness is
not
harder to detect on the palate because of the sweetness.
Yep. I'm fully with you. Now I will say this, I do like it. I'm enjoying it, but I just wish the sweetness was toned down.
It's interesting because it's almost like it's very sweet on the entry and then it calms down a little bit.
Yes.
So I'm able, whereas the Ron Abuelo, the sweetness really hit me on the back palate and the finish. This is the opposite. I get a lot of sweetness on the entry and then it mellows out a little bit and I get more of those interesting, enjoyable flavors. So
Agreed.
I have my qualms with this rum for sure. And I'm almost 100% sure I would prefer the new El Dorado 15, which we'll have to try at some point. I still give the edge to the favorite, the number 1 seed, the El Dorado 15 over the Brugal 1888. What do you think? Uh-oh. Is this our first disagreement?
I feel like it might be.
Wow.
I'm still kind of in between. It's not a blowout, right? It's very close. But there's something that I'm still, like you said, the sweetness is just, it's just kind of ruining some of it for me. The more I sit with it, the more I drink the El Dorado 15, the more I can both appreciate what it's bringing, but also lament that I can't get the rest of it without the sweetness. And when I drink the Brugal, it feels like, this is a good. It's not quite as flavorful as the El Dorado is. The El Dorado is
I would say it's definitely not as flavorful.
Right. It's definitely not quite bringing that. But what it does bring at least feels good. So
man, the sweetness on the entry is really
I'm in toss-up mode here of like, I really could see giving this to the
Well, just tell me which
Brugal.
one you want more. Point blank, which one are you taking? You can only have one.
I'm going to go with the Brugal.
All right. Well, the tiebreaker in this case goes to the less expensive rum, which in this case is the Brugal 1888.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I hadn't, because the way we have our notes, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, its price is more in the lower 40s to mid 40s, whereas the El Dorado 15 is more upper 40s to low 50s. So.
I'll say the caveat is, like you, if this was the newer blend, that's probably going to be different.
Well, let this be a lesson to El Dorado and other brands.
Wow.
Less sweet is good.
Yeah. Less sweet, more balance, right? You know?
Yeah, exactly. That's the key to it.
Right. There's just there's too much sweetness to balance out what this is. I think that's what they were going for in the El Do 15, but they missed.
And the sweetness just kills the interesting stuff going on from the Port Versailles components to that blend.
Yeah.
The El Dorado 12, which has fewer components to it, and in my memory, it on the palate far outshone the old 15.
Yeah.
So I will say the nose on the El Dorado 15 is fantastic and maybe one of the best noses of all, but that sweetness doesn't come through as much on the nose like it does on the palate. So
I'm with you. And it's just that the Brugal doesn't bring a bad nose. So it is matching up favorably, as one might say, in the bracket for me.
Wow, look at Brugal just like streaking through this bracket, the 8 seed, toppling the 1 seed, and making it all the way to it's now we're in a showdown with Brugal and El Dorado 12, and we also need to do Admiral Rodney versus Don Q, Gran Añejo. So I think we should go back to the Admiral Rodney and Don Q, Gran Añejo. Let's pull those out real quickly.
Interesting. So I would say to start off here, in the immortal words of Ja Rule, the rapper, it ain't even a question between these two in terms of the nose. What's that whole line? It ain't even a question how my dough flows.
Oh, you're really bringing in the early 2000s rap references. I feel like I'm back at like maybe an 8th grade or a 9th, 10th grade dance right now.
We met Ja Rule once upon a time.
Really?
He was like 5'0". Yeah.
Well, you make it sound like you and me met Ja Rule. I think you mean you and your musician friends met Ja Rule. I never met Ja Rule.
No, I'm so sorry. Yes, I went back in my other life as a musician. The group we met Ja Rule one time backstage. Nice enough guy, but super short.
Wow.
It's like when you meet people that you see on TV, you just don't expect them. Like Sylvester Stallone supposedly gets that a lot, and other people, Tom Cruise. But yeah, he was quite short.
Just a bunch of short kings. If we're calling them short, that means they're really short. Because like I'm like 5'8.5" on a good day.
Yes.
Yeah.
So. Exactly. But yeah, for me, I'm not like the Admiral Rodney nose is much better.
In the nose department, the Admiral Rodney crushes for me. But remember, the strength of the Don Q was the palate. So
agreed. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Go and
dive in. It's so good. Yeah.
The Don Q is so good.
It is so good.
I could seriously just drink that all day and not be upset. And I'm honestly, I've had, again, like we said, we've had many of these rums before in the past. But because of our strong disdain for 80 proof rums, I'm always expected to be left wanting.
Right.
And I do feel that to a degree, but at the same time, I would be happy drinking that rum. That's such an expertly blended rum. It's just executed so well for 80 proof. Yeah. And
you're
that's
100%
all I can say
right
about it. Go to Admiral Rodney now.
Oh, shit's going to get real now. Because these are really good, both of them.
Also good. I feel like the Admiral Rodney captures more of the low end, while the Don Q captures more of the high end.
I think that's a good observation, and I would agree with you. Yeah.
It's a little bit of deeper oak age characteristics from the Admiral Rodney, and more of that like perfectly blended sherry influence on the Don Q.
Man.
This is tough, man.
If these two rums were the finals, I'd be a happy man. I'm kind of sad that this is not the final between these two.
This side of the bracket was really tough.
Yep. Because this
could easily
really
be
great.
A final.
Yeah. Really great. All right. I think I've got a very slight edge.
I do too.
You want me to go first? You want to go first?
I'll go first.
Go for it.
For me, it's the Don Q.
Oh, man. For me, it's the Admiral Rodney still.
I thought this might be a parting of the ways for us, if you will.
Yeah. Well, so you said it best a minute ago, which is you said that the Admiral Rodney brings the lows and the Don Q brings the highs, and they're both super well executed. I think of any we've tasted so far, these are my two favorites in terms of execution. The difference and why I'm slightly granting the edge to the Admiral Rodney is the nose is better. But it's not a question, like I said. The nose is better.
That's true.
And secondly, I prefer, between maybe the two of us, I think I prefer the lows, coming from kind of the bourbon background and that oak influence and the spice that comes from it as a balance needs to be there for me to get maximum enjoyment. And that's kind of what I miss from the Don Q. As well executed as it is, it's a light rum that brings that elegance, but it misses that piece. And so that's why I'm giving the nod to Admiral Rodney. That said, I'm going to let you say your piece and then...
Yeah, I think for me, it's harder for me to find what the Don Q Grand Reserva brings in other rums than it is for me to find what the Admiral Rodney brings in other rums. So, again, there's not supposed to be a scale of uniqueness, but to me, the Don Q is a little bit more unique than the Admiral Rodney, and also it's a little bit cheaper. It's around the price point that I wish the Admiral Rodney was. And so, but this is primarily not considering price. It's just flavor-wise, what the Don Q's got going on. I'm picking up what it's putting down, basically. So I think a lot of this is just personal flavor what we desire out of rums.
Yeah.
The Admiral Rodney is a little bit more attuned to you. The Don Q is a little bit more attuned to me. Both great. Again, this goes back to what we're saying all the time, which is don't just poo-poo every column still rum. There are some really great ones out there, and I think both of these are examples of really good column still rums.
You're right.
But yeah,
all right. Well,
unfortunately, I'm not budging. I don't think you're budging either. I was going to say,
so I guess we have to go down to value.
I guess we have to go to the tiebreaker, which, the last one seemed to favor you. I think this one might favor me. So the Don Q Grand Reserva, somewhere 54.99. It's like 50, mid 50s to 60 range. Admiral Rodney is more mid 70s to 70 range, maybe upper 60s in some places. So if we're going by the rules of the tiebreaker, John, that means that, unfortunately, this is the end of the road for the Admiral Rodney.
Cue the Boys to Men.
Cue the Boys to Men. What's the appropriate Boys to Men song to play in this situation?
End of the Road. That's what I was in.
Oh, okay. See, I'm a little less familiar with the catalog. Can you give us some? Give us a few bars.
I think that's the right key. It's oh my God, I'm forgetting the song now.
You just remembered the bass part.
Yeah, I haven't heard it in so long, but I know it's End of the Road. And you know that I'm right. Why do you play with my heart? And why do you play with my mind?
There it is.
All right, that's enough.
Revealing the hidden talents.
All right, so you got that one, and I will say that the Don Q Gran Añejo is a really spectacular value. So I get why that moves on. And by the way, I would have argued that the Admiral Rodney box and bottle was adding another $5 to $7 to maybe $10. But in this case, the Don Q is so good of a bottle too. I can't make that argument. So
all right,
it moves on.
There you go, from the man himself. All right, so now we're going to do El Dorado 12 versus Brugal 1888, and this will determine what the final is. We know Don Q has advanced to the final, so whatever wins this is going to go up against Don Q in the final. All right, I'm going to set these up real quick.
Yeah.
I'm excited to go back to the El Dorado 12 because that was also a standout. You were talking about Don Q and Admiral Rodney being right there. I think I have the El Dorado 12 being right there as well, so it'll be interesting to compare those. All right. So going back to these noses, at this point, they're both familiar. Oh, man. The El Dorado 12, it doesn't have everything the 15 has, but it does. I'm getting like a mintiness to it as well that I don't think I picked up on initially.
I get you. I feel like I recognized it, but we didn't vocalize it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was like familiar, but I didn't put the words to it the first time.
Yeah. There's like a menthol.
Yeah, a little bit.
But I will say the Brugal nose is great.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. Solid. It's rock solid.
Solid is the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the noses are both good, but I have to agree that there's just something more going on with the Eldo 12.
Yeah. I'm tasting the Brugal 1888 at this point. At this point, I'm trying to... We're splitting hairs, Yeah,
agreed.
So, got to get a little bit more critical. I do get kind of like on the finish of this one, almost a wet newspaper sort of quality that I'm not as big a fan of.
I think I see what you're going at, but it doesn't bother me somehow.
It's not that it bothers me. It's just that it's there. And I'm looking for reasons to be negative about these rums at this point. I'm going to do the same treatment to the El Dorado 12. So
yeah, it's really hard to find fault in this palette for El Dorado.
Wow. Yeah, it's really just when you compare that experience to the 15, which was the old 15. Again, this is the new El Dorado 12. It's like, why did they ever think they need that sweetness there?
Yeah, it's not close.
No, like to me, this on the palate, and I know we're just supposed to be comparing this to the Brugal 1888, but this El Dorado 12 blows the 15 out of the water.
Yep. Yeah.
And I don't have to think twice about it.
I know as we're going on, it's getting a little quicker and easier for us to tell. I think that's part of just the exercise itself. But, I'm going to spare the suspense and just say I think it's the El Dorado 12 here. The Brugal is given a mighty showing. I think it really came up in my estimation even more than where it was just in this bracket. But this El Dorado 12 is spectacular, and it's hard to beat.
It smokes the Brugal 1888. No shade meant to the Brugal 1888.
Right.
And I'll be completely honest. I had a little taste of Brugal 1888 within the last 6 months at some point. And I remember just being like, wow, there's nothing going on with that rum. And this exercise has made me a lot more appreciative and favorable of it than my previous perception was, especially since I had such a negative perception of the Brugal Añejo. I actually think 1888 is a perfectly solid 80 proof rum, emblematic of the style that it's going for, even with the little bit of added sugar, which I wish wasn't there, but isn't really that detectable overall to me. So yeah, it's had a hell of a run. Let's see, it started out as an 8 seed. First it took down the Monimas Classic Gold, 9 seed. Then it took down
the El Dorado 15.
The El Dorado 15, which was the 1 seed. It's just a total giant killer out here. Yeah. But yeah, that's really funny that it just completely crushed. Not crushed, but like we both agreed. Or no, I was a little bit more towards the El Dorado 15, but it was a respectable decision.
Agreed.
By you that the Brugal would advance over that. But now it's being undone by the new El Dorado
the little
12.
brother. Yeah. It's a revenge story.
It is. Amazing. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we can lay the Brugal to rest.
So we've got our final. It's the 4 seed El Dorado 12 and the 3 seed, the Don Q Gran Añejo or Gran Reserva Añejo.
Gran Reserva. Wow. Yeah. Okay. We made it all the way. El Dorado 12, Don Q, Gran Reserva. 4 seed versus 3 seed. Not quite a Cinderella story, but neither of the two biggest favorites advanced.
Right.
To your chagrin, perhaps.
Well, I do think that Admiral Rodney was... Yeah. But I kind of wish at the beginning of this we would have asked people to like pick a favorite or something so that they could follow along with it. I know we didn't do that, but hopefully people
in their heads, I think people did that. It's just instinct, honestly.
But yeah, I'm excited to put these up against each other and see what we come out with.
All right. Well, we just did the El Dorado 12. I'm going to go back to the Don Q. And this is going to be really interesting because these rums are so different, right?
They are. It's almost unfair. Not really, but, it is quite different.
It's just hard to compare them a little bit.
Exactly. So again, on the nose, it shouldn't be a surprise. The El Dorado 12 is the more complex and the better nose. The Don Q Gran Añejo doesn't get
It's the biggest weakness.
Really. It is.
It doesn't have a very interesting nose, somehow, for me.
No, I don't think it's just for you. I think it's just it's just not a very interesting
It's just
nose.
like all the interesting stuff I get from the sherry influence on the palate, which is like to me damn near perfectly executed sherry influence.
Yep.
It's not really there on the nose.
Right.
But the El Dorado, that's not the El Dorado 12 is it's a much more congruent experience, I would say, between the nose and the palate.
I agree, and it's more present, and it's like you said, part of the experience. Whereas the Don Q, it's just the nose isn't really part of the experience. I nose this, and then I would sip the rest of the way and not really nose it again. Yep. Whereas with the El Dorado 12, I would sit around and I would nose it, and I would sip it, and I would nose it, and I would sip it, and that's part of it.
Oh man, I'm at war with myself right now.
Yeah,
it's like
when I drink the Don Q, what comes to my mind is well integrated. And by that, what I mean is we said well executed and well integrated. It's kind of going hand in hand. There's just no flaws in the palate. Mm-hmm. I mean, no flaws that I could, other than it being, lower ABV, but we've talked about that. And it's just a pleasant experience in every way on the palate. By the way, I'll give a quick story about this. Do you know that this was one of the first premium rums I bought?
Okay.
And partly because of the bottle, I'll not shy away from it. The old decanter style bottle of this one that is no longer available. I loved it, and I was like, oh, it looks great. So I bought that, and I didn't really care for the rum at that point in the sense that I thought it was more boring than I wanted it to be.
Okay.
And now with a better appreciation for all, rum and being able to place it into that in a way that I can understand how well made it is, well integrated, well executed, all of that. But again, the nose wasn't there for me, and it kind of felt thin compared to all these other things that I was experiencing in Jamaican rums and Barbados rums and all that. So I used a bunch of it in Coquito.
Oh, wow. You made it a Coquito rum.
I did. And I didn't really love it there either.
It didn't come through?
No.
With all the coconut milk and the spices?
It just didn't stand up to it. Yeah. I mean, that's where I think a Don Q7 would shine, right? Now I know that. Now I have that understanding, whereas before I didn't. And I thought a better quality rum would make a better quality Coquito. But
well, again, we said this is like an elegant, delicate kind of
exactly.
Rum. And so it's kind of like if you complicate it with a bunch of other stuff, especially a bunch of heavy flavors that go into a Coquito, it's like what makes it special gets a little bit lost.
You're 100% correct. All I got from it was a little alcohol, and that was it. And so you just mentioned for the first time, I think, the word delicate.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think elegant and delicate is exactly what this rum is, and it's the best of the bunch with those things in mind. So that is...
I'm going to ask you again, is it better than the Admiral Rodney?
No.
I just thought I'd try.
If that one is, in this scale of 40% rums, if I give that one a 9, I give the Admiral Rodney a 9.5.
Okay.
It's close, but it's somewhere in that vein. Right. So now the question is El Dorado getting a 9 or a 9.5 for me?
I think it's safe to say, at least at this point, that the 3 rums that were head and shoulders above the rest,
right?
El Dorado 12, Don Q Ground Reserva, Admiral Rodney HMS Royal Oak, right?
I agree.
We're in agreement.
We can agree on that. Yeah.
That's the surefire top 3 from this exercise.
And the 2 dark horses were 10-1 dark and Brugal 1888.
Yep. I think that would round out the top 5.
I think I've got a winner.
Man, it's so tough because I'm enjoying these rums so much. And I'll be totally honest, I've never bought a bottle of Don Q Gran Reserva or Gran Añejo.
Yep.
I've just had it here and there over the years. I have to get a bottle of this after this experience. Honestly, part of me wants to say it's, for a certain type of person, the perfect introductory rum.
Yep. Yeah.
Just amazing in that capacity.
Well, yes and no, because remember, as an introductory super premium rum for me, I misused it and misunderstood it.
That's true.
On the other hand, I agree with you in the sense that it is approachable and, there's a lot to like in there, even though it may not be the most complicated or complex experience of a rum. What it does, it just does so well.
If I had to contrast the Don Q to the El Dorado, I would say the Don Q is about brightness, and the El Dorado is a little bit more about, I don't want to say darkness, because that's not but it's darker. It's a little bit more, it's more that bottom end. The Don Q really pops. The El Dorado is more complex, I will say.
It's almost like the Don Q is like the bright white kitchen in a house, and the El Dorado is the study.
I was literally about to say the study. Yeah. The leather.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just got more of those deeper aged characteristics. A lot of leather, but also some of that's like stone fruit vibe that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It's really good. Are we ready to? I don't know. Have you arrived at a decision?
I'm solid where I'm at. Yes.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first because I think mine is not as surprising. So, as much as I enjoy the Don Q and agree, I'm glad I have what I have left of it in a bottle in my cabinet. The El Dorado 12 surprised me and brought more than... I didn't really like the El Dorado 15 that much from when I bought it. But again, going back to all the reasons we mentioned. So I didn't expect to like the El Dorado 12 as much as I'm liking it. but I'm really liking it. And like you just said, I've got to find a bottle of El Dorado 12, the new one now. I have to. So I'm going with the El Dorado 12 as my winner for this bracket, and I'll see what you want to do with yours.
Well, I'm not going to make things dramatic. I'm just going to agree. As much as I love the Don Q, I give a little bit of edge to the El Dorado. It's a bit of a combination of the nose delivering a little bit more and also the price point. So, I mean, it's just really hard to beat at that price point.
And it's the squatty bottle, squatty dark bottle that you love.
Yeah, the squatty. I love the squatty bottle. I do like the bottle actually more than the Don Q bottle.
No way.
Which is perfectly nice, but
you're perfectly wrong. But
the El Dorado, it's just more distinctive, more memorable. It's got more personality, more lovable.
I don't know.
It's got it all.
Who do you want to show up to the party with? The El Dorado or the elegant, amazing-looking, head-turning Don Q bottle?
Depends what kind of party. I'll say that much.
All right. Okay. Fair enough.
All right. So we have a winner.
Yeah.
The El Dorado 12. Dun, da, da, da. I feel like we need some sort of like special
fanfare.
Yeah, some fanfare. This was a really fun exercise, and honestly has, I would say, if anything, it's improved slightly my appreciation for what can be accomplished in an 80 proof rum.
Yeah.
Although, as we've said many times throughout this episode, I would say that I wish I had a higher proof version of all of these. Just bump it up to 90 proof and let's see what we're dealing with at that point. That would be great.
Yep.
I think on our last episode, when we were talking with Chris Franke from the Green Zone, he was saying his, like, just please, El Dorado, give like a high proof El Dorado 15. That would be great as well. And we need, actually, like, John, we need to go and just get a bottle of new El Dorado 15 and do the comparison.
We should.
I've had new El Dorado 15. I just haven't A-B'd it with old El Dorado 15. So we should do that and revisit this and maybe bring in the new El Dorado 12 as well. But
or maybe do a whole new bracket with El Dorado 15 new blend and some other stuff. Yeah.
If there were a 90 to 100 proof El Dorado 12, this version, it would be an automatic, always have to have it, go to incredible rum. So that's what I would leave listeners with. It's like, it's really good at 80 proof. El Dorado, if you're hearing us, just try bumping it up a little bit. Even like 86 proof, I'll be a happy man. So I don't know. Any final thoughts, John?
No, I agree with you that it did raise my level of appreciation for 80 proof rums out there. We so often we get caught up because we're hobbyists in the things that are, you know, higher ABV and special in some way and limited and all this stuff, right? When you've got these really, really good rums that are out there that are just on almost every shelf of every store that you go into. But because of that pervasiveness, we tend to discount them sometimes. And I think we need to refocus on saying, look, there are a lot of not so great experiences to be had in this field, but that shouldn't stop us from enjoying the ones that do it well.
I feel good about saying both of these final two rums that made it here are small miracles. 80 proof rums that somehow really deliver. So going back to the original question, Sam, Don Q Grand Reserva, El Dorado 12, and we'll throw in Admiral Rodney, HMS Royal Oak. You won't go wrong with those as 80 proof rums. I'm sure there are others out there, which let us know if you want us to continue this journey of bracketing out 80 proof rums.
Yeah, we could do Agricole next time. We could do, there's a lot of different ways we could take this, and there's plenty more, even 80 proof aged molasses rums to go if we want to do a whole nother bracket and a super bracket like we mentioned. That might be fun too. So yeah, we just need to know, is this something that is interesting, fun, valuable in the sense of hearing other people talk about these rums, put them head to head? We know it's not perfect, right? We know that we could have set the seating up and had a different result here. It's possible, right? maybe Admiral Rodney wins in a different kind of setup. I don't know.
You just had to get that in there.
I'm just saying. But the point here is that we are the cream does rise to the top in this kind of method most of the time, and I think that that's important to focus on.
The wheat separates from the chaff.
Exactly, a winnowing fan being used. So yeah, I mean, from that perspective, this is a fun and interesting exercise for us. We just need to know, is it fun, interesting, and valuable for you?
Yeah. Let us know what you think. Let us know what your takes are on these rums. You can always reach us, host@rumcast.com. That's HOST@rumcast.com. Or you can find us on social media. John, where's the best place for them to find us?
At the Rumcast. We are at the Rumcast on the gram. The camera eats first, as they say. I heard one of my daughters tell me that recently. The camera eats first, Dad, is what she said. That was hilarious. Yeah. So anyway, we're there. We're on Facebook still for all of the people over 40. We're there too. And clearly we've had a lot of 40% rum at this point, and it's caught up to us, Will. But, you know, we're on X. Yeah, we're on X for the amount of time that X is still a viable platform, which seems to be getting worse and worse by the day. We haven't joined Threads yet, but eventually maybe we ought to join Threads. So lots of places to find us.
Threads that's not going to happen. Yeah. Anyway.
Stop trying to make Threads a thing, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Actually, that reminded me of the Mean Girls quote about fetch, you know?
Exactly.
One of the oldest moments I've ever felt in my life was I saw a tweet, or I don't know what it's called now, a zeet or whatever on X.
I have no idea. It's not a tweet anymore either? Oh.
It was a trailer for the new Mean Girls movie that's coming out, and it's which apparently is like a remake. Like, they're already doing a remake of Mean Girls.
Remake already?
And it said, it's not your mom's Mean Girls. And that made me feel incredibly old. I was like the gif of Matt Damon in Saving Private Ryan, you know, where at the end where he like transitions into an old man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
By the way, it's a GIF. It's a GIF.
Okay. We're not going to get into all that. We've had enough debate and disagreement on this podcast. Anyway. Let us know what you think about these rums or other 80 proof rums that you think rise above the others in the field of competition. Email us, host@rumcast.com, or send us a message on any of the platforms that John just mentioned. Anyway, we'll see you next time.
Cheers.